We are live. Look at me picking my nose. What a great way to start Hash Church. Picking my nose. Welcome, everybody. Hash Church, season 12, episode 34. That was the fastest stream that went live that I can ever say. That was insane. Last week, I don't know if you guys remember, but it didn't work right away. And I was worried that it was going to do that again. So welcome, everybody. Super stoked to have you on the show. And yeah, we're going to go over a couple of things real quick for our sponsors. And then I'll start letting some folks in. We got a good show for you today. I'm actually pretty excited about the IPM episode because, yeah, I got a little IPM issue myself here recently. So let us start with, as always, shouting out our sponsors, our wonderful sponsors. There we go. I was on the wrong page. Oh, also, let's record this. All right. So we have started over again, recording in progress. Welcome, everyone, to Hash Church Season 12, Episode 34, the IPM episode with Jorge Cervantes, Stefan DeMeyer, and Matthew Gates. First off and foremost, we're going to shout out our amazing sponsors because, well, we couldn't do it without them. And we want to mention the Press Club. You can elevate your solventless game at Hash Church with the Press Club's premium lineup of rosin extraction essentials, proudly supporting the community through top-tier tools that make clean, potent concentrates a breeze. For their legendary rosin bags with proprietary pink stitch and zero blowout guarantee for unbeatable durability and yield, to award-winning wash bags, premium parchment paper, pre-press molds, and the innovative Press Club rosin press for precise heat and pressure control. Whether you're crafting at home or scaling up, their IsoSwab stations and collection plates keep your setup spotless and efficient, all crafted with 10% food-grade dye-free nylon for contaminant-free results that preserve those precious terpenes. You can join the Press Club in championing Hash Church by heading to thepressclub.co today and gear up for your next epic press. Honestly, if you need rosin bags, if you need a cool spoon for scoop and bubble, hook up with the Press Club. They got you every time. They got you every time. All right, let me see what we got next here. Let's pass bubble bags and go right to Puffco, because of course they have been an incredible sponsor. So huge shout out to Puffco for powering Hash Church. Puffco's game-changing devices like the Sleek Peak Pro, the versatile Proxy Dash Core, and the Compact Pivot bring unmatched style and performance, making extracts a vibe for everyone. Their passion for cannabis culture keeps our community blazing strong. You can discover the Puffco difference at www.puffco.com, and you can follow them at Puffco, and you can check out PuffCon, which I believe is coming in September. All sorts of glass artists will be there with booths. All sorts of people will be there. I myself am going to try and be there. So hopefully we'll see you at PuffCon in California here in a little bit. Okay, there we go. There we go. Let me just mention to my people here that we are live on the homeostasis. I got all sorts of, we had a massive, insane storm last night, like maybe the craziest storm I've ever seen. All right. Yeah, it was insane. My wife and son and I, we watched lightning strikes 1,000 times, if not more. The thunder was nonstop. The lightning was nonstop. It was actually quite a beautiful experience. We don't get a lot of that being a coastal village. We just don't get a lot of that. But the temperature has been ridiculously warm lately, and I suppose that's a part of it. Ooh, that's nice flower. There we go. Start up the machine, Boro Josh says. All right, Boro Josh, the machine is getting started. Absolutely. Yes, RIP to the old dogs who paved the dirt path we pilgrims walk. I like that one time, 1650. And good to hear, Carol LEDs. I don't see you, Matthew. I see a black screen. I'm not sure if I can't hear you either. And again,
well, I wasn't speaking.
Well, now I can hear you and you are speaking, but you are a black screen.
Yeah, I noticed that. I'm not sure why that is.
Me neither. You might want to do some troubleshooting. That might help you. That
Well, I
might
know what
help
the
you.
first thing you do in this situation is you turn it off first and turn it back on. Let's try that.
Yeah, that's kind of where I would start. And exactly what he did. I would start by I thought he was just going to turn his camera on and off, but no, you got to bounce. You got to turn the whole zoom off, bounce, and come back. I do it for the Terps. So I hope you guys are doing it for the Terps too. Although I will say lately, I have been enjoying these wonderful jars by Dom Connoisseur, this blueberry smash, as well as this strawberry cream cake. Both really nice, but both like ester dominant, those fruity ester flavor profiles that a lot of people call terps are indeed esters. And so I've been having an esterful morning here. I've still got a forum cookies as well from If You Know, You Know. I can see you now. How are you doing, Matthew?
I'm doing really good. How are you?
I'm doing okay, man. It's like I said, we had a crazy weather event here yesterday in my little area. It was like 2 hours straight of thunder and lightning, and it was like the bright lightning because it was kind of cloudy, so it just made the whole sky white. Um, it was incredible. It was something we don't get here, being a coastal village this close to the ocean. We just don't get thunderstorms and lightning like we did yesterday, and it was better than a TV show, I'll tell you that much.
We had a hurricane developing over not in San Diego, but like off the coast apparently, or some
Jesus.
sort of like strong, cyclical weather. There's different names for these kinds of things, right? Cyclones and such. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
I think the word that was used was like hurricane. But anyways, the Pacific is getting hit with a lot of energy, a lot of heat, and that's got to go somewhere. And it'll be interesting to see how that changes. Supposedly, they're saying that despite the extreme heat that we're dealing with right now, it feels like Florida. The definitely the subtropical aspect of the subtropical desert I live in.
Mm.
But apparently, we're gonna get a lot of rain. Maybe like in a few months when it becomes the rainy season, because all that energy then moves the cold air around or the whatever has to happen for the rain to occur at this giant regional level. And we're overdue, if people didn't know, for a megastorm. Maybe every 200 to 300 years we get like a massive, massive deluge.
I'm
So
glad that you brought up the long cycles. I don't know enough about it to get into disagreements or discussions with people. I have a scientist neighbor he is all about discussing weather and weather cycles because he understands the weather cycles differently from most people. He's in the 15 to 20,000 year weather cycles. He's focused on weather cycles that aren't just so his favorite thing to do is decimate climate change people because he's just like, listen, you're looking at data that's like this big. You should expand your data so that you can kind of realize that there are these cycles on the planetary weather cycles that they're massive. They like you just mentioned superstorms every 300 years. Well, you could get a superstorm and then be like, oh, we're destroying the planet. Like we've destroyed the planet. Look what's happened. The storms are coming and we've destroyed the planet. So I mean, I live in a very, very in Canada, we had the ability to get rid of our carbon tax across the board. And my province was like, no, we want to keep it. We want to keep the carbon tax. And I guess the carbon footprint offset that Canada has done in the last 10 years, which has costed us billions of dollars, apparently was 27 days of China's footprint. So we're like, like 10 years and billions of dollars, and we did 27 days of offsetting China's footprint in our own footprint. So it's an interesting reality that we're living in these days. But yeah, it is what it is. Welcome, Etienne. I see you've got your big fat joint there hanging out of your mouth.
Good morning. Morning, Matt. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing really good, actually. Thanks.
Matt's ready to
Um,
go. Let's see
yeah,
if
I'm excited
Jorge and
because
Stefan are ready to go.
where are they?
I don't know. They could be having a beer and a meal right now. It's like 6 o'clock or something over there, right?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's totally true. You hit him up on the telly, right?
Oh
On
yeah.
WhatsApp.
Yeah. I feel like Stefan is not ever far from that.
Well, it's also they're in Barcelona, and it's also the first game day of the La Liga season.
Well,
So so it's usually a little more of an atmosphere there in Barcelona on game days, needless to say, or game
Ain't that the
nights.
truth?
So yeah, yeah. Ooh, what
Oh,
you
how
got
about
there?
some blueberry smash? Fruity ester rich morning is what I got here. I wish the camera would give
Is
me the
that the
level.
stuff you were making last week?
No, that stuff is in the legal market, and it's not as easy to get out of the legal market from like last week. Last week is like I'd have to have it tested in a lab. I'd have to have,
Oh,
this whole 9 yards. And, that material was made for export. So it won't end up on the legal market here in Canada. I'd have to go and, buy it in another country.
nice.
Yeah. What are you smoking on? Oh, you muted yourself. Etienne, you muted yourself.
I had an event the other night. We were gifted our cannabis trail signs. I originally received mine 4 years ago, but I was given again because CBCB Cannabis Buyers of Berkeley, California Buyers Club. They received their signs, so we did a kind of a Berkeley ceremony with Visit Berkeley people and Brian Applegarth, who does the Cannabis Trail. So. Um, yeah, it's next Friday. Valerie Corral and Wham are going to be receiving their Cannabis Trail signs. So
Amazing.
um, between the Bay Area, East Bay, Santa Cruz, and Northern California, in the sense of Mendo, Humboldt, and then Trinity are kind of along that cannabis trail in California. So basically, there's a website you can go to if anybody ever wants to travel, as well as it is for tourism. That there's an actual trail now, and so you can actually follow it, go visit the dispensaries, go visit growers, and historical figures who have been part of the history of California cannabis over the decades. So it's an honor to one, be part of it, be on it, and of course, in our 27th year, it's just one of those things that's yeah, it's really nice. It just shows that we've done things properly over the years, and to be recognized by our peers and our locals. And most importantly, like in Berkeley, because Berkeley has a very much a historical situation. So in my speech, I reminded people on how we won the right out of every American to see inside every voting machine. Just one of the things we did along the way that we didn't expect, because we ended up trying to get our business permit in 2004, and we lost by the election. Okay, so we have an initiative process here in the United States, for those who aren't aware, which means you can take your idea or concept to the people. And so west of the Mississippi, we have an initiative process where if you get enough humans, registered adults, to register and then accept and write onto your idea, they will put it on the ballot. And then your constituency get to vote on it. It's a wonderful thing. So we had been trying to get our business permit from the city of Berkeley. We wanted a cannabis business permit because originally we filed for a miscellaneous retail sales, because there was no such permit that existed in 1999. So my business partner, Don Duncan, went down to the city, and they're like, permit, what are you asking for? And he said, miscellaneous retail sales. They're like, you have to tell us what you're selling. They're like, cannabis. Like, sounds miscellaneous and not for us. And they signed off on our business permit. And so over the years, they adopted us. And so we tried to work with them, and they kept telling us to jump through this hoop. And we jumped through that hoop, and they'd be like, pull the rug out from under, saying, no, we need you to do this now. And so it became these series of jumps that we went through. We jumped through every single one, and they would still, pull the permit out from under us and wouldn't give it to us. So that's when our lawyer, James Anthony, hi, James, wherever you are in Hawaii, he said, take it to the people. So we got signatures and enough to put it on the ballot. And in 2004, we lost by 1% of the vote. Now, in the United States, when you lose by less than 1% of the vote, you can pay for a recount. So basically, the county of Alameda and Berkeley said, you give us $33,000 tomorrow, you can have a recount. So
33 G's?
33 G's, because you basically have to pay for people to come out and go through absolutely everything.
That's 50 racks in Canada.
And so that was again, this is 2004.
Ouch.
Have it tomorrow. And so
Yes.
each one of us all put together 11K cash, because we were all cash, went down there and threw 33K on the table. And Berkeley's like, shit. And so
Get
they
to counting.
Yeah, get to counting. And the absolutely most terrifying thing I've ever witnessed was watching this. This is 2004. So this is Hanging Chads. And this was also the first time election machines were used in Alameda County. And especially in Berkeley. So after watching them toss out the students as transient, so their election votes didn't count, we then asked to see inside the voting machines. And Diebold nor Alameda County, which is the county that oversees us, said, no, you can look inside the machine we download them into, but you can't look inside the voting machines. And it turns out after the end, we lost by 900 and something votes. And after watching thousands of them literally get tossed, we were pretty angry. And a law firm out of Florida contacted us and said, hey, believe it or not, you have the perfect legal storm. Can we take your case and run it through the courts? And we're like, pro bono law? Absolutely. And which basically means free. They paid for it all. They ran the entire thing. Well, it took 4 years. And after 4 years, the court said, okay, Alameda County and Diebold, you need to produce the 420 voting machines. Kid you not. Couldn't make this shit up if you tried. And they gave them a certain amount of time and they refused. They don't know what happened to them. They disappeared. Alameda County and Diebold were like, voting machines? I don't know what voting machines you're talking about. So the court's like, okay, you want to play shenanigans? Fine. You're tossed. Their ballot goes back on the ballot for 2008. And you get to pay for all the lawyers. And Diebold's like, fuck. And we won. So Diebold ended up changing their names after, because they're now voting elections something or other, because apparently they can't take a corporate L like that and exist. And yeah, we got our vote put back on the ballot, and it would end up winning by over 64% of the vote. It became originally Measure R, but that year it became the double alphabet. So it was AABB. Ours was JJ. And
JJ. Let's have a JJ.
JJ won by over 60% of the vote. And that's how, after a decade later, JJ. And yeah, then we were able to finally get our permit in January of 2009. So it literally took a decade and literally a legal fight through the entire federal system and I want to thank Mike Goodbar and Donald Tolbert, rest in peace. They were two of my employees. Donald was our custodian. And yeah, they're forever the plaintiffs who won. Every single American who's watching, you all have the right to look inside your voting machines just because of what happened to us in Berkeley, California. So that was one of the things I reminded Berkeley of, their history and how the skein that's woven that it is into the American tapestry. So it's pretty amazing to be part of just something just that small, but that's one step in the many steps that we've taken over 27 years just to exist.
Yeah, it's profound, really. It's not that small when you think about it. It's just it just goes to show you the lesson that we learned is you don't give up. But
No.
when they don't want you to win, you will not win. And it's just crazy. I watched it here in Canada. It's
Right.
almost as though they just decided, okay, you know what? Let them win. And we started winning. And it was one court case after another. Bam, 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 bam. But the more I look back at it, I'm like, why then? Like, why was the time? Like, why? Even my wife was like, isn't it weird that they've just kind of like given you guys weed now? Like, it just seems like they're finally like, okay, we're like, aren't you suspicious of that? And because my wife really was. She was suspicious of the fact that here in Canada, it just seemingly was like, okay, yeah, we'll ask the Queen to sign the dissent. We'll get the Queen involved. This should be
Yeah,
like when
see,
the
you
Queen,
got a queen and all that shit.
dude, not a
Parliament.
queen, the fucking Queen. Like, holy shit, dude, she's on our money. She's like,
That's true. When we got kicked out, well, we were detained because of Elvie's thing. My mentor Mac, I went to sit down, and he's like, "Don't you sit down?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "We don't sit down before the Queen." I was like, I look up, and of course, there's a picture of the Queen right there in the center of the room up there. I'm like, "Holy shit!
Yeah.
I'll be goddamn! There's the Queen!"
Hey,
And
she's
so
all
yeah,
over
there
the
we
world,
stood, refusing to sit because we can't sit before a Queen.
Yeah,
We're Americans.
like the fact that she had to sign that to get cannabis federally legal in Canada.
And it's not that way in Britain.
Like you have to just like, huh? Like, okay, I get it. Sure, yeah, we did a great job. The local activists of Canada are just amazing people. I'm not saying they aren't, but this was so strange that they just were like, yeah, you can have it now. It's
What's your deduction on why? What was your wife's also deduction?
Her deduction was she just doesn't trust them as like this is my wife.
We all don't trust our
The
government.
middle of COVID, okay? The middle of COVID, and my wife looks at me and she's like, so when do you think the aliens are gonna land? And I was just like, huh? She's like, well, I guarantee you after this, they're going to start talking about, and my wife is not a conspiracy. She's not like, she doesn't read. The only reason she even knows about shit like that is probably from me talking about it. She is not into that sort of thing. But she said to me as clear as a bell, at the start of COVID, she knew it was baloney. She was like, this is baloney. This is 1000% baloney. When are they going to, start talking about aliens? And I shit you not, dude, it was very shortly after COVID ended that they started talking about aliens, like announcements from the US government and shit. And she was just like, huge surprise, huge surprise.
Is she taking bets on Sasquatch now, or what's going on?
She is not taking bets on Sasquatch, but her and her brother have a very like funny local thing going. Her brother's always like jokingly like Sasquatch is real. Like I heard Sasquatch one time. I was tripping in a forest and I heard Sasquatch probably giving birth. But it's it's all comedy. It's just for shits and giggles. But at the same time, we know when people can be trusted and when they can't. And I feel like there's always just nefarious shit going on behind the scenes with world politics on both sides. Like I feel like the biggest trick is when you choose one side and then you're like, oh no, they got you. Like, oh no, but I digress.
That's the thing you find out quite quickly is there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes, and 99% of them we are not. So the guessing games continue.
Well, everything in the systems happen behind the scenes, right? It's like if you need your kid to get into the university, like, oh, well, there's some behind the scenes things that can occur. And all of a sudden your kid's in the university, oh, you're going to court. Oh, you're involved in some sort of thing, but don't worry. You've got a good lawyer and he's going to work it out with the prosecuting attorney behind the scenes. That's where that shit gets dealt. It doesn't happen in the court. 90% of the time. Mine didn't at all. It happened in the hallway with John Conroy and the prosecuting attorney. Buddy. Oh, hey, how's it going, buddy? Oh, yeah. They've been working together for 25 years at the time. So it was nothing for them to just work that out in behind the scene. And that's kind of the unfortunate thing. I'm quite certain things happen behind the scenes in your voting fiasco, right? It's these constant
Well, that
behind the
was just with
scene
the
things.
lawyers, but yeah, of course, the city and Alameda and Diebold and them were all meeting behind the scenes to kind of figure out, oh
That's what I
shit,
mean.
we've been pantsed. But at the same time, this is what we do also with my veterans group is we work behind the scenes at the UN and at the United
Well, you
States.
have to
Yeah,
if you want to get
yeah,
shit done.
right. I mean, just a series of articles that we've done. We've had multiple representatives and senators reach out to us. And so we're assisting them behind the scenes in writing legislature. We assisted behind the scenes to help Ukraine get their medical cannabis um, law up in place. And all that was being in the right place, at the right time, talking to 4 different levels of the Ukrainian government and just providing them with literature that they literally cut and paste into their dialogue. And boom, just being a facilitator of something behind the scenes as simple as, law inadvertently causes that type of change that's positive. Now, trust me, Marcus is talking about a lot of the negative stuff that happens, but I am talking, of course, about the positive things that happen too, because just because things happen behind the scenes doesn't mean it's all nefarious.
No, it was good for my
Well, there's a
court
common
case.
aspect of geopolitics
Right.
that, private information whatever private information that is dictates a lot of things, right? And I'm not, a political analyst or anything like this, but people
Pretty
who,
accurate statement nonetheless.
Dead on.
people who work, well, I mean, there's information, like, just even from a neutral standpoint, whatever you want to call positive or negative, but like, if country A knows something and they know that country B doesn't know that they know this thing, whether it's about country B or some other thing, like we know that, if you want a military example, we know that our systems will overmatch their systems. Maybe they think that they're going to have some level of intercept, but they won't, let's say, to give kind of a callous example. And so that would change how you negotiate because as some famous people on the internet who are in geopolitics have said that, like, what is it? Don't trust what they say. Look at their actions, right? Authentic signals, like moving troops around cost manpower, resources, making certain changes to things like that that actually count in that way. So
Mhm.
you can tell some things publicly through that sort of open information, but then there's things that are not public. And there's a massive amount of that as well. And the other aspect of that is that, like, all war, some have argued that war and conflict are a matter of what's called bargaining friction. And
Mhm.
you have to have bargaining friction of some kind about some kind of topic, and then you also have to have, like, willpower to actually do that and the political leverage to make that happen. If we talk about all of human history, not just the last, like, modernity, but like this is supposed to be an idea, a concept that's applied to, like, medieval times and even
Mhm.
ancient societies and things like this, because it's almost meant to look at it from a scientific perspective. There's a
Right.
lot of interesting stuff related to that. That I think is still relevant even to, our favorite plant and things like this and regulations and that kind of stuff. And I think part of it also has been a cultural shift. I think a genuine one, an authentic one. People have been familiarized with it so much. Not everyone, certainly, and there are sticklers, of course, but I do think that there's a lot of people who are like, maybe there's an opportunity for me here. Like, it might not be altruistic, but they might go, maybe I can actually make this work for myself. And that's also a factor as well, right? So, yeah.
Well, it's an opportunity to take an idea and to ideate it, right? That's one of the things that we do in the sense of some of these political offices on Capitol Hill won't talk to each other.
Yeah.
So a group like us, therefore, can be the one that silently moves behind the scenes and connects those offices, informs those offices about what's going on, right?
With
But
joints.
yeah, well,
Yes.
yeah, we wish with
It's called
joints,
a
but
joint measure, Marcus.
right,
That's
joint
right.
discussions, right? Yeah, so,
This conversation is brought to you by Hash Balls.
love them hash balls.
This
Big,
ball will
dirty, and
be 1 year old
wow.
next month.
Hmm.
1 year old. We'll celebrate
Okay,
her
so
birthday. Want to
I was
cut her
about to say,
open?
when do we get to sing it happy birthday?
Well, on her birthday, we'll cut that ball open and we'll see what it looks
And
like
what
on the
she is a
inside.
ball of which hash again?
Neon Sunshine. Lovely,
Neon
lovely product from
Sunshine.
the good folks over at Canara. Did you see my hash flag on Instagram, Etienne?
Your hash flag?
The hash flag. It's really, I should say it's really Nico's hash flag because it was his vision.
Oh no, you got you
1000%.
got to show us the hash flag. No.
Yeah,
Because
I didn't even understand it for a while. He kept saying a flag, and I was like, a flag, like a flight, like there's gonna be, and I even explained it on Hash Church one time. I was like, oh, it's gonna be like 3 different grams of hash. Well, when he said a flag, he literally meant like the flag, right? Like the US flag with colors of different hashes. So this is the hash flag.
Oh, I did see
Check
this.
out this beautiful piece of work. Been working on this project with Bulbman for a couple months now. Had the vision of a hash flag, red hash, black hash, and blonde hash mixed in one. So we'll be launching this under the Nugs Bubbleman collab sometime later this year.
I'm gonna need to fly
You're gonna
that
enjoy
flag
this
into
one.
my
All kinds of
lungs.
flavor. And
Dude, that thing looks insane, bro. How fun is that? And it's funny because, of course, it's the internet. So some people are like, that's just stupid. Who would buy that? But then other people are like, oh, that looks like a peanut butter and jam sandwich. Like, I want to eat that. Like, what is that?
That does
So
look
anyway,
delicious. It does
shout out
look
to
like
Nico for having the vision. And I really got to give a shout out to Justin Conway because I kind of let him down. I was on an interview with the Digging Deeper podcast, and I talked about infusing the hash with flowers. And I really didn't give him credit. And that 1000% was Justin Conway. He's the PhD chemist from Canara Biotech. He came up with this idea of like pressing hash with flour in the middle. And I'll be honest, I thought he was absolutely fucking batshit crazy. I was like, dude, you know how long it takes me to get the fucking weed off the hash off the weed? I'm not putting the weed back on the hash. But it really was his idea. Went into the lab with Etienne. We made it happen. We tested it. Unfortunately, it wasn't a product that passed for Canara, but I still got to give props to Justin for coming up with that. And the flag 100% is Nico. He came up with that. I'm happy to collab with him on it, but it was not my idea. Still super cool, I think, just doing novel, fun things and changing it up a bit.
yeah, you guys need to do like the old one and flatten it out so then it's like the credit card size. So then it's the flag. Yeah.
And it's the flag. Yeah. Just add
No,
like,
I mean that looks sumptuous in the sense that it almost looks like a slice of cookie with, a slice of cookie with the cream on the inside.
you know
Yeah,
what the best part
10
was?
out of 10 would smoke the shit out of that.
When I went and did it with them, they were kind of like, well, how are we going to make the hash gooey? And I said, don't worry. I know how to do that. It's simple. But what we're not doing is adding oil, and tons of people in tons of different markets, in order to get that middle gooey piece, they add oil. And there's no oil added to that whatsoever. That is just hash.
Yeah, the oil
3
would
different types.
seep and destroy the product in packaging as it sat there.
Well, there's a way to, that you just can't add it and homogenize it. But if it's there, then that's how it works. It has to be there. You can't, and I'm not saying that someone couldn't figure out some amazing method of homogenization, which would involve 10,000 tiny pins with mini quarter droplets being injected I don't know. I just know that you can't fake what we're like. If you took that hash in the middle in particular, which I'll show it again because it's gooey as fuck. If you took the middle one and you pressed it against a piece of paper, it wouldn't like leave a weird oily mark. But if you take hash and add oil to it to make it look like that hash, and you take that and you press it against paper, you'll see a stamp. It'll leave like a stamp of said oil that has been improperly homogenized. Fine for the naked eye to be fooled, but not for other little tricks to be fooled. And so, yeah, many people on the post were like, "Oh, you're probably adding oil to get it to look like that," and I was just like, I promise you on my word, I am not adding oil to that hash. It's just hash. The hash has oil in it. Why you gotta add it? Kind of madness are we living in here? Oh wow, here's a blast from the past. Are you guys ready for some best friend farms?
Hells yeah.
Right,
Where's Brian been?
dude. That is crazy, Brian. It's good to.
Bye, guy.
I was gonna say it's good to see you, but all I can see is a black screen with your name, Brian. There he is.
Bye.
There he is.
Bye.
Fuck yeah, dude. That's awesome, man. It's been a long time since we've seen you.
Hey, there I am. There you are. Yeah. Nice to see you all.
There you are. There we are. I was hoping that you would come on this show because at one point in time, when Jorge and Stefan get here and Matthew's already here, we're going to get into this IPM conversation, which I'm sure is always at the top of your, mind as a regenerative organic farmer.
One of the aspects, one of the vital aspects for sure.
Yeah. It's crazy when you can't just like bomb it with some toxic poison that will kill the planet, that you actually have to kind of put some thought into it.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I think, back to the SAM stuff, a lot comes from the genetic root start to it for resistance or adaptation, I believe, from what I'm saying.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Although I will say that recently, I'm pained to say it, but I had this beautiful 91 haze and it got fucking powdery mildew. Now I have a cut of the same cut plant growing in quarantine, but I am sorry to say, Matthew, as well, that fucking thing got so bad overnight that it's gone now. I had to do the hard work and say goodbye to her.
Yeah.
Because I have another clone of her, and thank you to the guy who gave her to me. And before she got powdery mildew, I managed to give her away to a friend. So he also has that actual plant alive still. But yeah, it's a fucking nightmare.
Yeah, it's hard when they're loaded with it, kind of before you get it.
This was not loaded with it, and it really surprised me because a narrow leaf drug cultivar is the last drug cultivar in the Pacific Northwest that I would think would just jump onto powdery mildew, and it was like quadrupling it overnight. Totally. Like it was just like ba-boom, ba-boom, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, and it's all like, I don't know enough about it, but it's not like you can get it from a fucking maple tree or a fucking, like, it's plant specific, correct, Matthew? Like, it's not like
typically, but powdery mildews are really famous for, and there's a lot of cool research that's very complicated, some of which I have brought some visual examples for us that I think would be really cool to see. Just how, what kind of thing we're dealing with, because sometimes I think people depict like powdery mildews, for example, as like 3 foot tall. It's no problem. My plants are healthy. Nothing bad can happen to it. It's all good. And then I work with a lot of people in regenerative and living soil systems and also systems where they don't want to use, noxious chemistries, which is, of course, something I want to support. So, I don't think necessarily the case. I think it's an insult to say that people who are getting these problems are making plants that are not healthy by dint of this, by the dint of this happening, at least. But they're also not 12 foot tall in that they're impossible to deal with and you can't ever deal with. And a question I get often is like, Matt, can I actually eradicate it? I'm like, what do you mean by that? And they're like, well, I want to be able to treat it and then I won't get it in the future. And I'm like, well, what does that mean exactly? Like if you're like in a place where you have like high biosecurity, like an indoor place, then that makes more sense because the whole point of that is to kind of keep that from happening, that spore load. But let me tell you, like for example, you said that it wasn't loaded with powdery mildew, and that certainly could be the case. But the first 5 days of infection are basically invisible to the naked eye.
Mm-hmm.
So you can definitely, and I mean, definitely is too strong of a word even. I think it's important to be measured in how we speak about it as well, because I've worked with people where as far as they could tell, they had talented workers. They had really, thorough and comprehensive ways of like crop scouting and checking, and they'd bring in cuts and this sort of thing. And maybe they wouldn't quarantine, but they'd inspect it, unfortunately. And they didn't see any problems. And then they get powdery mildew coming up, and they're like, "Well, what happened? Is it systemic? Is it in the plants?" No, it's not. But one, powdery mildews, even when they're this invisible first stage, they're taking nutrients out of the plant, they're making spores almost immediately. And so those spores, those hundreds of thousands of spores as a colony grows, will move maybe 2 or so meters at least through ambient air. If you have lots of air flow, people say that's a good thing. The spores move around. I don't know if you want to call that a positive or negative, but when they glomp onto the tissues, they're not like coming off. They secrete like proteins that harden them to the wax in the cell wall. So there's all these factors that I think because people aren't like trying to learn the deep esoterica about powdery mildew, they're just not aware of this, and they hear certain claims about, how to deal with them that maybe are true in some cases contextually, but maybe not others at best. And at worst, they're just frankly just not true. And sometimes new information comes out like where they suppressed the immune system slightly of a like a broccoli relative, Theocress, very commonly used in science. And then they gave it a very specialized powdery mildew that only colonizes barley. But when they did that, they found that the barley already had all of the different things it needed to colonize something that last shared a common ancestor with its primary host, its only host, 200 million years ago. Okay, so they have this incredibly sophisticated plant suppression capability, and they host a lot of them host jump all the time. But some of them are very specialized. Like right now, there's only a few species that are currently documented on cannabis. There could be more. And there could be more that develop in the future because, like in Europe, some estimates say that there's as many as 10 quintillion spores per season. That's a huge amount. I believe that's 100 trillions, if someone wants to check my math on that. So they reproduce and they mutate, and you get all these different strains out there. And then if you're growing cannabis, probably you're going to get some cannabis specialized ones, potentially at least. And so I'd be curious to see that kind of research to see where are we at with the adaptation, because all these other crops, we already know they're very good at this. So
Yeah.
that's
Well, the maple
that's one thing
trees
I'd bring
here
up to people.
are unbelievable at this time of year, how much powdery mildew they have on them. They're white. You just drive up and down the Pacific Northwest, and the maple trees literally turn white. Like there's so much powdery mildew on them. It's probably like 1 trillion spores on a single leaf or something. Like it's an absolutely outrage.
Easily.
You can see it so easily with your eyes while you're driving your car going like 100 kilometers an hour. You can look out the window and be like,
You could years back you could see it the same way on the grapevines going through Napa Valley, etc. Until they started what Serenade, which is Bacillus subtilis, which is a stylic oil applied bacterial that eats the white powdery mildew. And then they come back again. If it reappears, then they can come back and hit it just with the stylic oil, and it'll reactivate the other bacteria to eat the white powdery mildew. So there has been actual, frustrations, that have brought about, natural bacteria to eat that. But Serenade isn't available or wasn't available to cannabis, which was something we were able to experiment with, because when I worked for Ed Rosenthal, he was able to get some of it. And we were back in this is aught in 01. So we were dealing with a sudden surge in the Bay Area because we were providing clones to the Bay Area. I was literally putting out 5,000 clones a week for sale. And all of a sudden, just some of our genetics just started getting covered. And apparently the bacteria seems to exist just about the 40% level for humidity, which it used to be higher, but something caused a trigger and a change that allowed that bacteria, because it's always modifying itself, and
Well, it
it
can't help
modified.
but, not be perfect at replicating. So
Yeah,
something
and it
changes,
did.
right?
And it modified itself to our indoor conditions and ruined it for practically everybody, and it made us literally have to change and pre-select on how we were able to find our genetics. And then we started to ask questions, and they were like, well, it seems that those genetics that were acclimated to higher mountain growth don't seem to have the natural biological protections that something from the you know lowlands, or in the swampy areas have that natural protection to. So it seemed that those, we were calling them the indicas versus sativas. The sativas weren't, and the indicas were getting infected. Where that's what we found out after learning from Skunk Man Sam, that same plant is the same at elevation as his upper mountain. It's just those plants have adapted naturally the same way that bacteria has, and we've taken it out of those natural environments and tried to grow them in our environments and expect them to adapt accordingly. And nature's like, eat a bowl of dicks. So yeah, it's funny how it does that.
What's that you say about a bowl of dicks?
Nature, she's cruel to us all. Does it matter?
Oh, look, it's Colin. Colin's popped into the show just in time for a bowl of dicks.
Just in
Welcome,
time for my
Papa.
bowl of dabs.
Ah, yes, a bowl of dabs. I'm ripping
That's
two
way more
today.
welcoming.
Twofer, look at that.
Yeah, it's a twofer. It's a twofer. Man, like I said,
You
hitting
say
the
bowl of
esters.
dicks, I say bowl dabs. Okay.
Probably better.
Tomato, tomato, potato,
There we go, Brian. It's good to see your face, dude. Miss you, man.
That's creamy looking, Brian. What was that?
Dude, this is what I call smoothie criminal.
Fucking gas mask crossed with the back cross of
How did you know? So it's half gas mask mother. And then it's my friend Have Hash actually bred just a few beans of this one, but it's called citrus smoothie that Jake
Hash.
bred. And then I isolated a phenotype.
I feel like I met Have Hash in Barcelona.
Yeah, he's a good friend. He's really hitting it hard in the hash world. So
Awesome.
yeah, but this one is a lemon peel citridamus on a Z face male, and then half gas mask.
And there you go. I got one thing right. That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous.
What are you guys smoking on?
I'm hitting the esters today. It's Dom Connoisseur's blueberry smash and strawberry cream cake. So just super, super fruity goodness. It's the blueberry is actually shocking, like how blueberry it is. It's
Oh,
It's
wow.
so good when blueberry comes through like that.
It's like
Exactly.
ridiculous, actually. It's
Yeah,
it's
we had
not-
a blueberry banana OG times blueberry that was just insanely good. And
sounds good.
terps are just amazing on it. Really creamy,
I
different.
suspect a lot of it was esters, because if it's banana or
Yeah.
blueberry or any of those fruity flavors, that is esters.
I always,
love
it's funny
I
with,
love Antester.
with that batch. I always said to the guys like in the team, I was like, man, this is almost too complex. Like most people wouldn't know how to appreciate this, because
Right?
it's like, seriously, it's like it has like it has like a wine taste to it, where like it was like very grapey but very gassy, but it just was really. And then the berry on the back end was like overly blueberry. I still have like a smidgen of it in the freezer that I save for myself, just 'cause, like I sometimes go back and take a dab of it, and I'm like, yeah, it's just super
The
good.
smidgen in the freezer.
You
us
know,
discuss the
I have a whole
smidgen.
library like that. I don't know if you guys are like that, but I save things. Like I'll
Yes.
save like 20 grams of something and just freeze it, and like every so often I'll crack a gram out of there and let it come to
Preservation is a
temperature.
beautiful thing, let me tell you.
It's cool. I mean, it's interesting to see how far things can be preserved before they actually lose like their profile. I found that to be fascinating. Um, I see like a 4 to 5 year mark from like pressed hash to rosin.
Do you find that the freezer changes the cure chemistry or any consistency?
Depends on what you do to it. If you cold cure it, yes, and then you freeze it, absolutely.
Okay.
So what I do is I fresh press it and then freeze it.
Yes, totally.
Right. And then that's like the little nook that I keep for
Yeah.
me long term. And then the rest, if we're whatever we're choosing to do with it, if it's fresh pressed or cold cure or whatever,
Sure.
maybe we post process it more. I don't know. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff that we do. But yeah, the hash lasts for a super long time, like longer than 5 years. But when you press it, it seems like the clock starts to, it goes in dog years.
Yeah.
It also depends
So
on how you've got it in the freezer.
true. Yeah.
People put things
is
in
it
the
fresh
freezer with
frozen or what?
Ziploc bags and think they're sealed.
Right.
Then they're freeze drying their shit and wondering why it's so dry when they finally open it years later. They've lyophilized it right out of their own freezer.
It's true. That's a good point of
It's
bringing it
good
up.
to
Yeah, 'cause
seal
there's
it properly if you're trying to preserve and trying to keep things from escaping. Volatile organic compounds are a bitch,
yeah.
It's like they move and then their movement creates pressure if they're in a sealed environment. That's
And,
why they fuck with
and then when
packaging
you've
so
got
much. Go ahead.
and then when you've got multiple of one then together, right? And then they're mixing and combining and reacting and hating on each other, and yeah.
You mean like the
Even
flag?
putting raw terps in a freezer, dude. Go put 10 varietals in a freezer that are different. Let them sit there together for like a year. They become the same. It's fascinating.
Crazy.
Doesn't become Frankenhash, ladies and gentlemen.
Unless they're totally sealed, like Marcus is saying. It's like they exchange. It's I have a whole slew of stuff that just smells like Jack.
What do you mean by sealed? Watertight, vapor tight? I mean, what would
Well, to
make it
Marcus's
completely
point, it's
sealed?
like such a big conversation. You're opening up the can of worms. It's like, what is sealed, right? What's the
Right. Well, I
definition of
mean, I
that,
Yeah,
have
right?
things that come with
it's philosophical.
an
At this
aluminum
stage, sort
seal.
of,
I have
right?
things that are, plastically sealed. What is, yeah, let's open this can of worms. We probably got about 10 minutes till our guests
So,
show up.
okay, because like,
Top
all
of the
right,
hour.
let's talk about jars of hash. I think early days we were doing, I was doing this thing where I'd like heat seal them, right? And thinking I was like gonna get the terps to the people faster and all this stuff, right? And then I realized like once you seal it, like Marcus is pointing out, it like starts to push against the top, right? Because there's nowhere to go. And then these like bubbles happen, and then eventually the seal just like gets eaten away and breaks, right? So uh it's a weird economy to be in because you're dealing with like time and temperature, and then you're dealing with atmosphere, right?
And a
And
non-cold storage chain, right?
Yeah.
sometimes it depends
And
on
headspace. Headspace is hugely important,
yeah,
right? This is how active
atmosphere.
water is registered in packaging. It's not just in the material, it's the entire like atmosphere that it creates in that
Yeah.
package. And in Canada, the mistake that we made, in my opinion, was we gave way too much headspace in the beginning. Big jars with just a couple of little nugs in them created a lot of space for water to and pressure to build and all this sort of, I mean, bottom line is what you're trying to do is get as close to zero volatility loss as possible, which is probably impossible, but
Yeah.
how cold does your freezer get? Are you doing a -10, a -20, a -40, a -80? Because that will definitely affect how slow those molecules are moving and whether they're volatilizing out of the packaging, creating that pressure. Headspace, like I said, is to me pretty important. Oh, Mr. Stefan Meyer. Look at that. All right. Yeah, cold, airtight, very little headspace, and chemically inert packaging. That's kind of what you're looking for.
It's kind of the
There
name of the
you
game, right? But I'd say like on paper that sounds dreamy, but in practice I think it's really difficult to check all those boxes, I think, for all of us all the time. Like I think cold chain, supply chain, all the way through to your consumer. Let's just talk about that. That's really hard.
Yeah, well, especially
I
when the
think
consumer doesn't care and they're smoking pre-rolls that
They
are
don't
swept up
know.
off a floor with Disty and fruit terps and loving
yeah,
them.
I think
So
it's a blend of both,
there's
right?
that.
Like we're dealing with like education issues. Um, sometimes the door, right? They're not set up, like they don't have the infrastructure for it. Like there's no freezer or refrigerator or whatever, so you have to bring that to them. We found that a lot with our doors. Like they just don't have a space for it. So you have to kind of bring the freezer for them, be like, hey, all of our material goes in here. Um, and then yeah, to Marcus's point, like the consumer, like they don't know at all. It's like
Well, the ones that do operate in a different market, and most of them by, I don't know if it's their morals or ethics or what it is, but it's like they're religious about it in not supporting the sort of legal market. Like the one group of people who would be like, we get this, are the
yeah.
very people that are like, I'm not buying government weed. At least that's kind of how it is in Canada. You'll hear them say like government weed, and it'll be like, you mean like every other government thing that's like taxed in Canada, like every single thing, literally.
Yeah, and like most of the
Like,
herb they're buying anyway was grown in one of those facilities anyway. So it's like, yeah, it's a weird dichotomy. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
It's tough. You know what I mean? Because you're like,
the
you can't really get
hypocrisy.
into it and it's hard to talk about it because it's the unspoken thing that's happening is that's the new market, right? It's just coming from the same market. So that's an issue, I think, across the board. And I think the mentality, to your point, Marcus, is really seated in losing trust to the doors. You know, I think that in the early days we all like believed the thing, we all drank the Kool-Aid, and then we're just so kind of distraught over what has gone on. I think it's a hard thing for consumers to lean into the trust factor right now. But there's amazing material. Like you're putting out awesome material in Colorado. We're doing our best. Like I know we're all doing our best to put the best product out in New York that we possibly can. You know, there is super heady material out there, to your
Oh yeah.
point, at a really fair price. It's just, do they even know about it? And Brian's up there crushing it. Um, you know, it's it's tough. You know, I think it's a hard thing to talk about with consumers or just our community is like you want to support one another. Like if I saw Brian's jar in the shop or Marcus's jar in the shop, I'm gonna go buy that and then go talk to the bud tender about like how that's a great jar and I'm buying it for all these reasons. You know, I think that's really important. You know, I look at this like much like music, where like if I'm another band on the festival circuit or whatever, and I see another band that I really like, I'm gonna go get in the crowd for them. And I'm gonna go like buy their record and buy their shirts and their stickers, and I'm gonna go slap it on my gear and support them. And in interviews, I'm gonna talk about them, you know, because I think that's really important to lift it all up together at once and
Mhm.
start a conversation that's broader than just yourself, because it's not about you, it's about everything that's going around us
Well,
and
that
how
was
we
like when I last had Kay on from in-house. He's like, dude, it's like there's not a lot of brands in Colorado that we're competing against that invite us onto their show to
yeah,
it's like, well, of course, dude. Like, what do you mean? Like, we're not competing, we're just sharing a market.
yeah,
You know, you
yeah,
guys have been there much longer than me. I'm the late guy to the party. And I'm impressed with in-house and what they've done and the group they have and
yeah,
their ability to pheno hunt and find the right cultivars to make the next releases and stuff. It's
yeah,
and I think all of that is amazing. What I think my gripe is that I wish our little scene was bigger, and that the thing that is the biggest is kind of like, wow, like they just quick, convenient, like,
yeah.
distillate with some fake terps and some, these are the things that who would have ever guessed that that would be what the majority of people, love. I feel like this, like, kind of
Well, love,
false entitlement.
Marcus.
Yeah.
Marcus, let me ask you a question. Do you play video games?
Not so much, but I
Not so
did. I
much,
have.
right? Okay. Well, I was going to use an analogy that maybe some other people will appreciate too, but I think you'll get it, which is that
Yeah.
like sometimes you play a game and it's got weapons or something, and at the end of the round, they're like, your favorite gun was the assault rifle or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, it's not my favorite gun, it's just the one that I used the most. And I
Mm.
kind of resent that terminology in those sort of situations because I think that it's way more complex. I think that to your both of your points are very eloquent. I'd say the dynamics are very porous between all of these different sort of echelons of groups.
Hmm.
And so like it's like they're not truly separated, um, but they're also not truly flowing through, and like what you're saying, sort of this collaboration versus competition sort of mindset as well. Because I think people are operating also with different like models that don't account or can't account for that porosity. Like, there's the
Mhm.
people who, like you said, appreciate this kind of like higher quality, know about it, understand that it's not even just going further than this guy I really like who's a connoisseur says it's good, so I'm going to have it. Right? It's like there's a science to it, there's a methodology to it, there's an explanation as to why. It's like quantification,
Mhm.
uh, rather than just people believing whatever somebody says on the internet. But I also think that people, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like some people are also very cynical about self-identifying with brands or different groups, and the music example is really good there. Similarly, it's porous. You've got people, it's almost like people are, from an attention perspective, competing, if you could say it that way, because
Yeah.
people only have as much time in the day to experience and appreciate anything and everything. So
Yeah.
from that perspective, even if it's totally altruistic, there is that kind of that level of like interaction. Maybe competition's too loaded as a term, but yeah, I think that I think that that is just a physics of the situation that people have a hard time accounting for.
Mm.
I
What do you
think it's
think?
just a matter of time. I think it's palette refinement so that you have like that big sector is always going to be there and hold, likely to be the 90 plus even percent. But I see that things might drift, into maybe it's more like a 2 out of the 10 people because they get sick of the other side for so long. They hear about it or try their friends or it gets donated. That's a big thing. As smaller companies, it's hard to like get the familiarity out there as much as the access, wide access that the larger companies have. So
Mhm.
I think a valuable thing, would be to actually for the smaller companies, maybe, in bridging the gap, maybe it's even some work together with some access to familiarizing people with the product that's more small batch instead of it being, there's that where it can mix and friendly nature for access points that could be familiarization, but either way, I just think palate refinement after time, people are not just sick of it, but they want to try something else or something lights them up and they know it's out there. So I kind of feel like as long as some small batch or the really artisan product, if it is small, can stay around in it, then if it's there at a certain time, I believe it's going to be reached for and in more demand.
Yeah,
So
and I think that that follows ethics too, man. Like when I think about what people attach themselves to with any given thing and just putting my like world of design hat on, like people are enticed for your ethics and what you believe in. Your product is a byproduct of that, right? And that's something that I think everyone on this panel has done really extremely well. Is like you've let your ethics lead and your products are a byproduct of that. And it just so happens that this world that you occupy, you offer this thing that also connects with these other individuals. And I wonder sometimes, if ethics is in modern day sometimes, for goad, for the D9, or don't even call it D9, just lower tier products, because all at every step of product development, I truly believe there can be greatness. It just depends on what you put in it and how you approach it. These are all isolates. These are all just things that we love to, humanize and have conversations over what's better, what's worse. But at the end of the day, we're after volatile organic compounds, however you may get them. And we just happen to like a particular path to get that, and that's familiar to us. So I think it goes back to your point, man, that familiarity is really not there as much as we believe we have experience. And I see, Jorge and is in here, and you come from a totally different generation. So I wonder, I kind of passed maybe the question to you, is you've been here way longer than I have, and a lot of us, historically, I bet this conversation's kind of like more, not more of the same, but it's been happening for forever, right? Like, you know, we have big farms, small farms. How does that all work? I believe in small farms. I believe in there is enough canopy, that should be turned over and sold through. Because Marcus said it earlier, it's like there's a point where it just like falls off and it's all just hashishine and it's if you're after that, sure. But I think we're all after something quite more elegant than that. So, what have you seen, man? Like with this conversation, over the years, you've seen a lot of growth over the decades. So I just wanted to, since you've came in, welcome you and also ask the question, like, what's your take on that? You're muted. Yeah.
Still
I-
muted.
I was
Still
muted
muted.
saying you're muted.
Yeah, you're
Oh,
still muted. Terrible at reading lips.
you're still muted. Yeah, sorry, buddy. Yeah, we can't. There we go.
I mean, so sorry.
There we go.
I turned it off so so I wouldn't make noise when other people are talking. So yeah, the thing is, ethics has always been a real big thing for me. I mean, just it's pretty simple, pretty easy. Just tell the truth, and that's it. That's all you got to
Yeah.
do. Just tell the truth and don't stretch it. Don't do anything. Just be honest and nothing more. Simple, you can get excited, all of that stuff, but just tell the truth. And like it's been difficult, and especially in this industry because, well, a lot of people are they're just not controlled. And in our industry, we tend to gather the black sheep. I'm a black sheep of the family. It's just like that. We tend to gravitate toward those guys. And so it's kind of a hard group to control, because everybody's pretty independent. And then also there's been a ton of misinformation here. I mean, pretty much anything anybody wanted to say was true, and there was no other way to prove things. So what I'm real excited about that with guests like Matt is we're bringing science into the equation, and it's not personality, it's not opinions, it's nothing else. It's just hard data. And, that's like the way that everybody else does stuff, I mean, we don't have to just make stuff up. And I'm really excited about that because, I mean, we've got a standard like everybody else. We don't just make them up or whoever talks the loudest or anything, or says it the most time, or whoever has the most money gets to be right. Well, it's not like that. It's not truth. It does not work like that. Just because you're the big guy in the room doesn't mean that everybody got to listen to you. Maybe sometimes it's just logic that wins. And that's what I see. And that's what I'm really excited about promoting is just good sense, telling the truth, and doing your work. That's about it. It's pretty straightforward. I've seen a lot of other shit in the past too, and I don't have to go into that because everybody's been touched by stuff like that. And I don't see any reason to like dwell on it or anything. I think we just pay attention, move forward. But we can move forward now as a group. And what I've seen since the price of dope went down is this. People started getting along, because before everybody was making so much money and you'd point fingers at other people and it was too crazy. Now everybody gets along, or they get along a lot better. And over here in Europe, it's quite good, in the US, things in Canada, more the US really, people were more like individualistic, I guess you'd call it. And I don't in Europe, I mean, you kind of got to get along with other people because you're you're really close to everybody. And if you don't get along, well, it's pretty unpleasant. So you just got to get along. Yeah. So that's what I'd seen and I'd like to promote. Like I said, I don't want to harp on old stuff, bad stuff, negative stuff. I just want to move forward, and make things better.
What better way to do that than backing what you do with science? We're a big
Hey,
proponent
there
of
you
science
go.
here at Hash Church. It's amazing that you said that, and Dr. Mark wasn't in the room when you said it, because he's literally here every Sunday. I'm not sure why he's not here today, but he's probably no, I don't know if they started school yet over there yet, but welcome both of you, Stefan and Jorge. Nice to have you in here. Matthew was getting
Sorry,
into
we
it
were
earlier.
both late for church. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
know what
That's
though? Like,
okay.
I feel like if you were smoking a joint out in the car, it's okay.
No,
I feel like, yeah.
I was
Yeah.
taking a nap after lunch. I thought it
Same
started
here.
at 7, and thank God Stefan called me. He called me and he said, "Hey, you're late for church, dude." Huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually,
Okay.
two of us. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So you were late too. I don't feel so bad.
Well, you know
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
4
Yeah.
hours is a long
I thought
time.
it was 7
You guys-
o'clock.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it can be 7, it can be 8, it can be 6. We're
We
here
were
for
holding
4
it down
hours.
for you, boys. It's all right. We were doing some
Yeah.
tabs for you.
Yeah, we did hold it
Yeah.
down. In fact, I think before we get into this conversation, we're just going to watch this
Oh.
because it's a beautiful thing to sieve freshly freeze-dried bubble hash out of the freeze dryer. And it's almost hypnotic the way the hash moves and creates its own little environment in the bowl. It makes me happy too to know when I'm doing this in the lab that there are many, many, many people doing it in labs all over the world. Both of the legal variety and of the other side of the fence variety, and God bless both of them. I just love sieving bubble hash. I love watching it come out so clean and purified. It's yeah. Anyway, sorry guys, I just had to share that because it's a
I
beautiful
actually
thing.
feel the same way, honestly.
Right?
Yeah, I could watch that on a loop for hours, actually. Yeah.
I'll send it to you.
I feel like you could put like that Dune song that everyone heard in the movie,
Oh yeah.
the desert, like the yell at the very beginning, as they're.
Yes, I know
You
exactly.
probably get a bunch of views. Just put it on the Instagram. You can have that one for free.
All right, I appreciate that, Matthew. I will find the name of that song and I will put that back up. We'll see.
Yeah, let's see how it works.
You never know what's going to go viral. Although I did put that video up on Twitter the other day. I think it was that video. And I think it has like 100,000 views, which for me is a lot. Like that is a lot. I don't, I'm
nice.
I don't
That's
always
really nice.
hit numbers like that, but yeah, it's good when you never know what people are going to like. You never know. Actually, that's incorrect. It was the hash. It was the hash that got the views. 107,000. Did you guys see the hash flag, Stefan and Jorge?
Ooh.
3 different types of hash.
Ooh.
All
Peanut butter and jelly?
pressed together. Yeah, it looks like a PB and jelly. It's got a Lebanese style blonde. It has an Afghan style black in the middle. That's not oil. There's no oil added. And then it has like a reddish brown Lebanese style on top. And Nico, who really came up with the idea, calls it a flag, like a flag off the flagpole. He's like, oh, I just picture like a flag of hash. And I'll be honest, I didn't really know exactly what he was saying until he was just like, can you just make these 3 different types of hash? I'm like, absolutely. And now the group has since put them together into this flag, and we're releasing it in December in Ontario. So that should be fun with the OCS.
Awesome.
Ontario Cannabis Store.
To me, the first impression, it looked like my grandma's tiramisu.
Yeah.
It's a dessert in Italy.
Yeah.
I was like, what's going on here? Yeah. The risk is you bite it. Yes.
Yes.
like
Also,
dessert.
Madeleine. You know the Madeleine cake?
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. You got it.
It's the other one. Here.
Ooh,
right? The Madeleine cake. So there it
one was
is.
I want to see that as your branding. I want to see the picture of it with the slice on the side.
Well, you better get in touch with Nico over at Canera, because those guys definitely have the whole. One of the things I like about them is they have teams that specialize in each thing, and their teams are exceptional. It's kind of the first time I've seen it. I've seen all these different companies where they have the teams, but the teams don't communicate with one another. They're all fucking angry with one another. They all fail to execute. These guys at Canera are the polar opposite. They are the execution kings. They just execute, bam, 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 on a high level, at all levels, in multi dimensions. It's kind of psychotic, and I appreciate it. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with in regards to that. I'll certainly travel around and go to some stores and visit and whatnot, but I'm excited to get back into the Canadian marketplace. You know, it's been years since I was a part of it. It's very hard here. It's a very difficult marketplace to exist in, where you're putting all your time and energy. There's some companies that are doing well. I wouldn't say that it's, you know, completely difficult for everyone. And the companies that have managed to push through the last couple of years of difficulty, I think, are doing better and better now. But it's still fairly difficult for new people to get in and, you know, make their dent in the Canadian industry. I think a big part of our industry right now is export. Seems like everyone wants to everyone goes to ICBC in Berlin, and then they come back, they're like, I've got 5 new customers ready to buy like a 600 kilos. It's like, all right, get her done.
Well, we're proud of you, bro. You know, keep pushing, dude. You know, I think when I met you as a teenager, right? You know,
Jesus.
the dream was to make as much as we could. So here we are. It's
Make as much hash as we can, that's for sure.
yeah.
I'm
That's what I
literally
mean. That's what I'm
Saturday
saying.
morning. That video I just showed was yesterday morning. I
Make as
went
much
into
hash as we
work
can.
just to empty the freeze dryer so I could refill the freeze dryer, so that I could come in on Monday and empty the freeze dryer and have my full days of hash go into the freeze dryer. I am, by the way, loving my XL Harvest Right freeze dryer. I hear people complain and bitch and moan all the time because Harvest Right is just super difficult. And once you've got a broken unit or a fucked unit, you might as well throw it away. I will agree with them on that, but I'm loving my XL freeze dryer. I'm gonna smash 100 kgs through this thing, and once I've done that, it doesn't matter if it implodes, because its value has been achieved at the highest
Yeah.
level.
Well,
That's
they're
called a
fairly
good problem to
inexpensive.
have.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
Well, they're, you know, they've changed. I think they've changed the motherboard. They're not on relays anymore.
They've
There's
changed
a
all
bunch of
sorts of
stuff.
things.
Yeah, so they're getting a little better, but still, yeah, they are difficult, like a lot of manufacturers, but get the job done.
You gotta just like throw them away at one point. Like, it's insane. It does get to a point where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, this one has to go.
I'm looking forward to trying TJ's, the resonator.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to
I was
trying
gonna
that.
grab one, but we ended up getting this XL Harvest Right. It was used, and it was easy, and it was nearby. We got it in like within hours of wanting it. We had it in our possession. So, but I have been
Yeah.
talking to TJ about his for sure.
Yeah, this is cool.
Absolutely. Well, someone that's putting the time and energy into focusing on lyophilization specifically for cannabis, I think that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah.
I think it's a very unique thing in the sense that it's a product that off gases, and because of it, it's complicated, and it has, you know, a lot of strange sweet spots depending on whether it's resin you're curing or flower you're curing, active water, and all these like complicated things, once again, that I'm also excited about. Like Jorge was saying, the more science we can get in to perceive these things and just write them as, you know, truths, universal truths, like this is just how it is, the kind of happier I'll be for certain. Like, I'm into science at this point, catching up with the rest of the volatile organic compounds, so we can stop saying terps, that
Yes.
it's, you know, like this. I do it for
Yeah.
the terps. This shirt should say, I do it for the volatile organic compounds. That would be an accurate. This shirt is a lie. And I'm sorry to be wearing the lie, but here, I'll
A
show you
lie of
another
omission,
lie.
at least.
Look.
Yeah.
Here's another lie right here. The solventless quiver filled with volatile organic solvents. The
Yeah.
solventless quiver.
It's true. No, it's an education thing. I think we touched on that a bunch, right? It's like it's just time, education, persistence, and
Yeah.
data, you know.
I guess so.
We take data from I have data from every single run I've ever done from 2005 on. Right? So like before that it was like, yeah, trying to figure stuff out, right? And then now you can actually understand what happened to isolate what you can solve the problem specifically for, And that's a unique, I think, perspective that, shouldn't really be unique. I think it should just be a normal thing that you do in process, like it's, most industry has this type of QC in gating, if you will, like you only pass go if you know, if it's meant to do that or it goes to a different channel to the left or right, which would then be another QC check. So,
Hey, Jorge, do you want to maybe talk a little bit about the article you did recently in High Times Magazine, and we can kind of break into this lovely IPM conversation that we have
Oh man.
ready for today? The article is
I'll
nice.
tell you, Matt's the guy. Matt's really the guy. He's young, got a real good education, and his heart's in it, I got to give him a lot of credit there, and Stefan, my co-authors. They're the guys that, they're the workhorses, those guys. I have to say, I'm the old guy now. I'm the old guy now, and yeah, that's the thing. The big deal is about the article, is the part that really flips me out, with knowing Matt, is all of the insects and diseases, especially the fungi, those things, they all morph into stuff that's just a little bit. You just got to change just a little bit to be immune to the spray, the control, whatever is being used to control it. So they just change a little bit, and then they're immune to it. So that happens. That's like an evolving, ongoing process. And that's what Matt calls the ever swarm. The ever swarm. It just keeps happening. So if you're using BT, it may work once or twice, or for 90%, 95% of your control, but then it doesn't work on 5%. And those 5%, they keep getting stronger and stronger, and they're used to it. So you've got to have a whole arsenal, a whole set of stuff that you do. And you start with the least invasive, and you go to the most invasive, and you just, that's it. That's the biggest deal about this Everswarm stuff. That's and it was news to me, because I didn't realize it happened that fast. It really happens fast. And
You muted yourself.
You accidentally muted yourself.
Pardon, I hit that button. But what I'd like to do is really hear from Matt, because Matt's the real expert here. I'm just the guy that writes stuff down, but he's really the guy that's been out in the field. He's got experience all over the place in a lot of different climates. And that's really important to have all of the climates be, knowledge all of the different climates. And well, it's uh, quite impressive. And then also, he's his background is second to none, really. I mean, he's been around for 15 years doing the same thing, and he likes what he's doing and he's good at it. What can I say? So Matt, please tell us more about the Everswarm, because you're really the expert here. We're all, here to listen to you, actually. I mean, I'm pretty fascinated with all your background, and you've really helped a lot of people.
Well, that's a really astounding point to make. I really appreciate your kind words, honestly, Jorge. I really appreciate that. I also
You won them. You won them. I mean, it's not. I mean, I say it because of merit, nothing else.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Well, I think that the science point, I think that like Marcus had said earlier, and like what you're saying here, there was a lot of misconceptions. I think that was like a major theme of the article, and I think what we vibed on the most is this idea that like, and it's not to say that people who grow or people who don't have certain, like I said earlier, this like esoteric information, like the gene level, molecular level interactions, that kind of stuff. Or even if you go the other direction, that 30,000 foot level ecology and, deep evolutionary stuff. But it's interesting because if we talk about it with the right kind of simplification without being too oversimple, I think it gives us a lot of context about what we're dealing with and what's an actual robust strategy. Because everyone already knows like a lot of bugs and microbes, and people have made points about this in posts and things like, well, we know that things evolve, but that's true. We know that, but I think some people think that the process is very slow, or that the process can't, or that the sort of like the costs associated with some of the things like we talked about recently here, about like how something can happen in another part of the world. We might have laws where you can't spray certain things or you shouldn't use certain things, and we abide by them for ethical reasons, so people don't get poisoned, so that people don't have problems, and also that we don't affect the environment. And so that's all well and good, but then there's other places where the restrictions, whether they exist or whether they're just not enforced, there's these various chemicals that are used, these sorts of things, and then those costs we have to internalize it as a globe, as a community, because we can't escape it. We can't say like, oh, we're gonna make all the bad stuff happen. We're gonna shift that all to some other area, and not expect these bugs to like, move on the air currents, move through trade. There's research that shows like budworms that you had mentioned, like BT resistance. Like certainly, I know a lot of people who use BT, and I'm not saying that biocontrols can't work or don't work, because that would not be true. But it's more like things that we thought were a sure thing are just not as sure. And it's just, I think that people should just know that. And then it doesn't mean that you can't use this or that it's gonna be not gonna work in 10 years or 5 years or whatever, but it means that you need to integrate your process with other things, non-chemical things, like you said, other biological things. Sometimes it might be as easy as just having multiple strains active. So there's never one, sort of monolithic selection pressure, essentially, right? And so I just think that, like, for example, like biocontrols like predatory mites, for example, I already had people contacting me who I know are sort of in the biocontrol space and were very politely asking me exactly where I was getting this claim that biocontrols can be adapted to, because that's been a marketing point for a long time. And I'm not saying I don't like or that I'm against biocontrols again, but what I'm against is people not having an informed decision, or at least the very least that sometimes biocontrols don't work when you use them and you want to know why. And it could be for something that's totally unrelated to this, but there's research to show that like budworms who are on, they're like one of the worst pests of grain crops, the staple crops we need as humans, right? Going even further from cannabis, right? This as over 300 hosts. It has all of these different ways, all these different populations that have been tracked over spans of time that tell us that in cannabis we should expect some of these things to happen in cannabis. And cannabis is not special because somehow it's just not going to have this problem. And it's also a problem that's outside of us as a cannabis growing, sphere or community. And so we have to like just look outside of this. We also want to demand research towards cannabis and cannabis specific stuff, which we go over. But we also have to look outward and see what's happening and then prepare for that. And I know that right now things are very tough and difficult. The worst thing you could have is have your plan that you're hoping is going to work, have vulnerabilities that you're just not aware of. And the insidious part is you don't know when they might not be a problem. And so I'm not trying to be extremely alarmist with, just to get views or whatever like this, but I think it is a controversial take that has a lot of backing. And so I'll stop there for the moment.
Do you think that people thought of, because we were taught in school that, evolution is a very long and slow process, that it kind of lulled us into the sleep to not believe that these, bugs and everything and adapt much quicker than we realize to our inside and outside environments, on top of, cannabis has really only been a larger industrial crop in North America in the last decade, right? So a whole span of hosts are looking or have found this plant that it's been missing from their food source, so to say. So it's just very fascinating, the discussion, as well as, something that was right under our nose that we all seem to miss, right?
It's invisible. A thrips that's resistant to spinosins or pyrethrin or hexythioax or all these other noxious abamectin, whatever. It looks just like another thrips. And a thrips that is maybe one of the populations that doesn't need a male, looks just and is a female and just makes more females like aphids do, doesn't look like the other ones, right? And there's no way for you in the field, even if you did know that these existed, and even if you could look it under a microscope, you couldn't tell. So it's impossible to track in some ways. And so like, and people talk about genetic resistance earlier, had been mentioned. This, I think, is actually the most efficient thing. I think in some ways you could call it the most important thing. And I think a lot of people agree with this. But I think that you need to quantify claims about resistance, or at least understand the context. I understand right now in a lot of places the research, I wouldn't say it's not happening, but I would say that like in the USA, there's a lot of really interesting research happening in Kentucky. I worked with Cornell to create an IPM guidebook, which is free in English and Spanish. So you can check that out at Cornell. If anyone's interested in that, just contact me. I'm happy to share it. Or we could put in the link in the description or the chat or something like this. So
Yeah.
there's some of that, there's some of these like extension agencies where it's their entire job to like look for these potential problems, and then, because it's money is going into this. People want to make a living off of this. I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff going on, and I don't want to get into all that stuff because I do agree it sort of sours the dynamic. But on a pure knowledge base, this information has to happen for people to spend millions of dollars or their entire livelihood at least growing cannabis and expecting that it's gonna work out. They're not gonna become destitute. And so as just like we've decided that firefighters are good for society because people shouldn't have to like pay out of pocket or whatever for a firefighter to come in. Similarly, this kind of information and collaboration with other groups of universities and institutes and even other growers and organizations like that is really paramount. And some places this is more possible, and other places this is highly restricted or not possible. But that's kind of my point. But the other thing is that like people will make claims, and I've had it happen with clients where they're like, "Well, how could this happen? I bought genetically resistant to PM plants," and I'm like, "Well, what does that mean? What did they tell you?" They're like, "Oh, well, it's genetic resistant. They didn't get it when they grew it." Oh, well, Do they like do any controls? Are there any genes they looked into? Because there's even some of that research out there of resistance. But like even those resistances, they can be adapted to as well. But the point is that if we're aware of this and we're asking people, well, what makes your plants worth the premium price or worth my entire livelihood because that was a problem before? Because if they are robustly resistant to, let's say, powdery mildew, and you spend 30% of your time dealing with powdery mildew and lots of money, you know, then you can obviate that problem. And I think in that way it's the most efficient. But it also requires not only like the resistance from 10 years ago is not the same as today, right? And similarly, this will also be true in the future. So the onus is on growers and breeders and some of these organizations to come together and sort of quantify it. And I think it's up to growers to also be aware that a claim or a handshake isn't really maybe sufficient.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly other crops, like we mentioned earlier, it's different. And I think, people should have those protections. And I understand why a lot of those things aren't in place right now, but I want people to be informed in that way.
You have a battle going on between the plants, the people who grow them, and the bugs and the viruses and the bacterias. And they're both kind of trying to build their teams up. And I wonder, when a bug becomes resistant to whatever spray, or the plant becomes resistant to, is that an evolution? Is that like a horizontal gene transfer type thing? Is that where is that coming from? Because it doesn't seem like it's evolution. It happens too fast.
Well, do you think mutations aren't evolution? It's a pretty big cornerstone of evolution.
Sure.
Well, then it's evolution, right?
Yeah.
Evolution's cruel, right? As it's always put, right? So in that case, in that spirit, it seems like what Matthew's saying and highlighting to me is that, yeah, it is happening at that rate, which is alarming, right? But it's something I remember as like even a young grower, I was always told that you can't use the same product in the same rotation twice, right? Otherwise you risk, and this is again hearsay talk, like back in the late or mid 90s, right? So for me, these are things that were just passed down, and I grew up in an agricultural environment, so it's, it was coming from people that were actual farming, for a living. But I also will, in the same breath, will say, like the other day I was at a farm and someone was talking about blue nerds, and they're like, it's a great greenhouse varietal. And I was like, huh, what makes you, and this is like the 10th person that I've heard say this to me. And but there's no attributes of that suggest that, to be honest. I've grown that plant a lot. It's a great plant. It's a blue, it's part of the blues family, but like blueberry, it exerts that kind of expression, but it's not as resistant as I would argue that there's really a lot to talk about there. So I think there's a lot of varietals that are in nurseries. And as Marcus said, like it's all battling itself because you have people trying to sell clones because it's just part of the business. You have people trying to make a business out of growing the clones, right? And then you have consultants trying to help people figure out how to make the best out of all this. And everybody's trying to get a piece of it all, right? So it's very complex, and really hard to kind of, to your point, put a definitive thing on it. But I do, to your point, I see where your brain is cooking and getting to where the truth does matter, and you have to have like something to back this up, like a genetic marker, a run that you did for 2 years or something with data behind it that you can show that these are the IPM strategies that I used to achieve these results. Because I know for myself, I have strategies, because when I hear IPM, I hear strategy, right? I hear that IPM is a broad thing that you can talk about because you have a plethora of topics within that topic that have to be unpacked and kind of strategized around, right? You called out one, which was, corn borer is what we call it on the East Coast, right? We'll pick on that for low-hanging fruit. that's a really difficult insect and species to control because to your point, it evolves quick, you know. So planting other crops like corn next to cannabis, which everyone did in the early days of hemp, and they wondered why their flour was impossible to sell and had bacteria all over it. It's because of these bugs, right? And to your other point, using a spray, I think, is one part of IPM. Do you have any thoughts on how you incorporate pest management with, beneficial bugs and then using other products like cease and other non-invasive to, beneficials to a point, because, you can toast your beneficials using these types of products. Do you have any thoughts on that, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, like, and I think to your point here, I just want to reiterate that everything's contextual too. So,
Yeah.
like, even if someone says, so right, so even if you had some kind of a source where it's like, hey, you know, these are powdery mildew resistant whatever plants, but also here's what we did, or I think it's also very valid to just give people the context that you do have, like, because maybe you don't. I get it, people don't have these resources, but they might say, I'm in this climate, I did these things, or I
Yeah.
didn't do these things, you know.
Yep.
And I think that's also at least helpful, to give some kind of context. As far as using, like, let's say predatory mites or other sorts of macro biocontrols, with other like, sort of safe, good products. Spot spraying is usually a really good idea, like as a general broad stroke. Like maybe you broadcast, like I don't know what the context of your application is, but if you're doing like a preventative broadcast of some predatory mite, let's say, and you need to kill spider mites or whatever, but you also have powdery mildew that came up. So what do I do? Well, you don't want to nuke everything, right? So presumably the best option is usually to do some spot spraying. And maybe you would order some other things to reapply. You probably were already going to do that anyways. A lot of strategies usually are not just one and done with biocontrols. Like in the scenario I'm making up as I go here with spider mites and maybe Persimolis or something. So that I think that's usually a good compromise. A lot of it, everything, in fact, there aren't solutions, there's trade-offs, and that's a really big difference. It's really important, I think, context to have. It's also a context in military strategy too. That you're dealing with cost benefit analysis, and like some people were saying in the chat, for example, like even if you use a product that's considered safe or whatever, like that doesn't mean it makes it okay to apply all the time in every sort of scenario. Does that mean that I support that people are blasting their plants right before harvest with something? No, that's like not really a part of a strategy I would condone. Generally speaking, I can't, but like, because there's also quality control. Like I'm at Hash Church. You think the trichomes aren't going to be affected? You know what I'm saying? So like, I think
Yeah.
that a big aspect of the context is also what's your goal, right? And that's a conversation I often have with people is what exactly, is the goal? And maybe, look, like I really support people growing for smoking and for using in this way. As absolutely, I myself am part of that group. But there's also really beautiful uses for cannabis that are not related to that. That I'm excited to hopefully happen in the future, like livestock feed or using it for phytoremediation. Or possibly even textiles and other things like this. So I also think that those applications are also valid, and those will also require different genes and different scenarios as well. So,
Cool. Yeah, no, thanks for answering that. I think as someone who's after resin, I tend to not use any oils at all. So it's a tricky, strategy using different types of beneficials throughout the plant's life cycle. But yeah, no, it's interesting because I feel like IPM is the most important aspect of your cultivation, and how you run that dictates how well things do beyond your feeding schedules.
and where you
Brian, I
are,
know
you
you.
might. Oh yeah, I
Oh,
can
go ahead.
continue. Sorry, I don't want to bogart the conversation.
No, I wanted to ask Brian, Best Friend Farms. Like, I know he's gone through a lot with his living soil. Just like I thought it'd be great to hear from his
Sure.
perspective.
What do you, yeah, actually, one of the things I recently did, I'm at like 5 years for my living indoor soil of reuse, and I got some compaction, and then I noticed like 2 runs at the end, the 19th and 20th. Actually, I was keeping track, kind of geeking on it and learning. And it was refurbing the topsoil layer, for life, surf and turf, organical kind of thing, compost, and a good organic fish bone meal from local. And anyway, I started to see actually a little bit of late into flower, not major, but some of the PM crept in the last two sites, the 19th and 20th. And then I also noticed like a harshness myself, and then some response back for the medicine flour, not as much the hash, but the flour. So I kind of like digging into it and looked in and started just running at home soil pH testing. And then I kind of like applied where I come from, a farm background too, but it's more for personal farming. But my dad's a biochemist, and he's actually, kind of explained how lime is thrown down in large application. And it brought up, I was basically started with research, and my friend you're helping with Adam, we dug in, and it looked like I had to bring up alkalinity into the picture. So I was pretty low when we tested. It was like it was pretty scary low. I believe it was in resting like in the 4, like 4 to 5. And I went, wow, had a feeling. Excuse me. And then I brought it back into range and just kept checking. Now we're doing weekly testing. So it's cool to talk about because I'm small batch, this indoor is like a 30 liter, and keeping track of it like on the weekly testing just at home and making sure it's in a range. I accessed a really good dissolvable or, natural source at our organic farm store called Fedco in Maine. And I got a calcium limestone or lime that breaks down really nicely. So we're learning how to dose it correctly, track it, and get it in. But that's the advice I can give that comes from the soil side of it, that I just honestly like sharing it because I'm seeing major good results, knock on wood. But the alkalinity brought in and the pH, brought up within range seems to rest in like what I'm learning, and I'm here to listen to what other people know. But what I'm learning is 6 to 7 range on the living soil, and I seem to be in a pretty good spot. I'm controlling humidity, but I've seen a good turnover the last year where, again, knock the wood for pathogen, but it's been without the problem, the PM monster creep in. So anyway, just throw that in. Alkalinity, soil
I feel
pH.
like it's like that phrase, all models are wrong, some models are useful. It's like, yeah, or like with maps too, I think is the phrase as well. But it's true, like we don't always know exactly what's happening too, like with your pH reading. Like certainly
Right.
that's a abstraction of what's going on, right? But like in different parts of the roots and different,
That's, yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like it's very
different
hard to get.
soil zones. Yeah.
Yeah, exact, especially in that context, right? So like that complexity, that diversity, on the one hand, I don't want to use those as like weasel words that could mean anything, But by the other hand, it is a true, that like there is this like massive heterogeneity, in those systems. And so it can also make it harder to track. It can also make it harder to apply certain other techniques, based on the physiology that we're targeting, and that kind of a thing. But I'm really happy to hear that. I'm certainly not going to knock it, and we find out. We might not even know all the repercussions of why that has been helpful in this context. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, pretty rudimentary. I mean, also try to start from a place that is genetically apt towards health and or types. Rather, I guess it would be in the feed. I do a lot of breeding, about 25 years in with it, and it's for my own plants mostly, and for applying to the market of my own and my own medicine. But I weed out. I call it the art of culling, just on a simple level, where it's the ones that are that are just not making it, and they almost seem like what I would call a PM magnet. And then it's like, no go. I almost like, I can't really care how good it is otherwise, just for like terps or hash terps, where if it's going to be that dog in the garden, it's going to affect the neighbors even around it at a certain point that do have some seemingly natural resistance, like at least a genetic, some sort of a defense.
Yeah, there's susceptibility genes and there's resistance genes, and
Yeah.
sometimes, cannabis has many plants have a famous one for powdery mildew we've known for over 100 years called the mildew locus O group. And
Wow.
scientists were always like, this is weird. If all these plants have susceptibility to, because when you have mutants that don't have it, they're robustly resistant to those powdery mildews that they get. And they're like, well, why wouldn't evolutionarily this kind of weed out, right? Because usually that's what happens, and it's because spoiler alert, powdery mildew is derived from a common ancestor with saprotrophic fungi a long time ago, and they use those same signals that plants use to communicate with mycorrhizae. So if you get rid of those, and that's MLO genes. So those MLO genes do that. And some of them, maybe you could take some out because there's different ones, and maybe you could be more precise with it. And certainly people have done this with barley, for example, and have had good, maybe not perfect, but really good, robust resistance. Because what you're doing is those genes change how the plant cells in leaf and also in root tissue where mycorrhizae are, the cells will react to pressure that mycorrhizal hyphae and powdery mildew penetration pegs and aprosoria put on the cell. And so because it's a similar process, the plant has evolved to react and sort of support this intrusion, at least conditionally, and they have an immune response interaction. And but unfortunately, powdery mildew uses those signals to say, "Hey, I'm a good guy, IFF, friend or foe, I'm a friend," and the plant goes, "Cool." But unfortunately, powdery mildew is also at the same time suppressing the plant cell even before it penetrates with excretions and things like this. So if powdery mildews can't do that in like if they don't get their foot in the door, then they don't get the rest in, and that's where resistance can either do really good or break down. And so like there's this really critical juncture, and the reason why so many pests are good at what they do is because they have some kind of aspect of this that it's not an even playing field, it's not fighting fair, and that kind of a thing. And I actually wanted to share something, since you'd mentioned casting lime, and that kind of a thing. I had a little slide, that I will promise not to be long-winded about. But I collected some slides from a big video on powdery mildew that I'm still working on because I've been very busy, but it's sort of meant to be a huge sort of like deep dive into powdery mildews and some of these topics. And also I had some other topics here about immune system reactions and that kind of thing. But this is a slide from from the video that is incoming. And it's from a report where they were looking at silicon application and resistance in powdery mildews. And so when you look, they had the same plants, the same environment, all this other stuff, same level of health for people who want to make this argument, but it's presumably the same sort of context. And basically, they found that if you over applied too much, there wasn't really much of an effect. Sorry, let me start over. So there's these two figures, right? And there's two different plants, this Victoria and this HK. And when they put zero silica, this is how much disease severity they got, right? So they got pretty high in both cases. But when they had applied 600 kilograms per hectare silicon, which I know is huge, large scale and that kind of thing, but we could break it down possibly for people. But the point is that they had 82% reduction in powdery mildew severity. If they put 900 kilograms, there was no real benefit past 600, right? So that's important because if you're a silicon grower, you're going to think, or I'm sorry, silicon grower, excuse me. If you're someone who's producing silicon and wants to use this data, you'll say, oh yeah, use a bunch of silicon, the more the better. But research like this prevents, this kind of potential sort of wastefulness of nutrients and also your resources for getting those nutrients. And it also shows that You know, some people might think that silicon, I mean, certainly if you're already dealing with powdery mildew, this is not a reactive treatment, but this is something that you can apply to the plants. And it turns out that when the leaf silicon content reached around 1.7%, there was minus 70% powdery mildew severity. And when they applied 600 kilograms per hectare, they had minus 85% powdery mildew growth decline. So the colony growth was less and less, much less than the control, for example. So so like you could apply some of these nutrients and you can have this like really massive effect, even if you didn't change anything about the genes, you didn't change anything about the environment or any of that kind of stuff. And I just think I mean, that's an aspect that I think, people might be able to make use of on the large scale and also on the small scale. And silicon's pretty cheap compared to like having to spray all of your plants, especially at scale. So.
Hey Matt, what's the silicon? Oops. What's this? Oh, thanks. What's the silicon source?
Yeah, so the last time, ignobly, the last time someone got this presentation, they asked the exact same question, and I actually don't remember off the top of my head. But I can definitely find that for you, and the report, if people want to look it up, is called Suppression of Hemp Powdery Mildew Using Root Applied Silicon. It was published in 2022. I think it came from Kentucky. I think they're doing some hemp research over there. I want to say it was there. It might not have been.
Do you know is it soil top dress till in, or is it a water application to get it into
I don't remember I don't remember, honestly, but they would have that in the methods section of the research. I want to say that it was not tilled in. I want to say that it was applied maybe by water, but I'm not totally sure.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Look into that. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. And and so I think also silicon has immune responsive effects in a lot of plants as well that happen to be effective against fungi and other things. So that would be like one example of a sort of non-traditional thing that maybe people have heard silicon versus powdery mildew, but they don't know exactly to what degree and that kind of stuff, and it can cause a lot of waste not to have that information. So I'm excited for the scientific movement in that direction.
Actually, you brought up a really good point, the 600 kilos and the 900 kilos and no benefit, for the extra 300 kilos. I know a lot of people, especially, well, indoors and hobby growers especially, they apply too much fertilizer and too heavy of nutrients, or not just nutrients, but also pesticides and fungicides, I mean, and they're looking for more benefit, it's like a lot's got to be better. And so often that causes other problems as well. And it builds up. So what kind of things have you seen that way where people over apply? And where they over apply and you've seen a buildup or it caused them secondary problems?
Definitely, I mean, a very common one that I'm sure a lot of people have heard of is maybe like applying too much of like a horticultural oil.
Yes.
Because you can clog that stomata and that can be a problem. Definitely, if people have not heard of that example, that's definitely one. For me, when I'm working with people who are applying, I mean, like for example, some products, some chemical compounds that are like naturally derived, like pyrethrin is one, not permethrin, not pyrethroids, those are different. Those are synthetic.
Yep.
But pyrethrin from chrysanthemum or synthesized in a lab, it breaks down in the presence of light and water, which is really abundant in the grow space. So, and it breaks down into things that are also likewise not toxic, extremely non-toxic to mammals, unless you're a cat. If you have cats in your grow, don't spray pyrethrin, they can't process it. Fun fact. Not so fun fact. But that's the thing, is that a lot of times, sometimes people will apply a product where there might not be a benefit, there might be a secondary harm, like in the case of the horticultural oil, but by applying it a lot, you're just kind of wasting your time potentially. Maybe you get like good coverage and you want to be sure of it. So it's really it's where it's really important to like look at the costs of that kind of a thing. And
Mhm.
as someone who has worked with people who have to put on the gear, and it's very hot in the greenhouse, and they have to do a really good job, and that there's a lot of like personal human elements to this. Like it might be hard to crane your body around the tray or around the tent or up and under the leaves, or maybe you have netting, or the bays don't move very well because you told your cultivation supervisor for months and they just don't want to deal with it. All these kinds of things happen a lot, and you have to deal with an imperfect example. And so that's another example where if it's not going to have damage, it's going to have some other elements, some maybe wastefulness or a cost.
Okay, okay. But it's interesting you didn't it's generally wastefulness, not accumulation at all that you've seen. Because
Oh, I mean, if you use like I mean, I would say that a lot of times for me, I'm so concerned with like incompatibilities. Uh,
uh-huh.
like for example, I'll tell you an example for this is that like some products say that you should or that you can mix them. That they're compatible with other products that are going to have a complementary effect. And that can be fine. And I've worked with a lot of people where that's worked out. But then I've also worked out, this is a really good point. I'm glad you challenged me on this a bit because this is a more interesting example, which is that you might do everything right, but maybe somebody didn't clean the tank right or something else happened and you get a really bad problem. And it's not that the products are incompatible, but some X factor happens that you didn't account for, and now you've sprayed this product on everything, and you have this problem you didn't even expect. And so for
Right.
me, I might say that that's happened sometimes for people, and that's why I recommend that people are very careful, maybe just only apply the one thing, be very reduced in which products, like you said, with invasivity, don't
Yes.
really. I want people to not be applying things that typically have a high chance of phytotoxicity. So, like from a perspective of where I'm coming from, yes, but from people what they're already doing, like if they're not, or if that would probably be the biggest one, something that causes like phytotoxic damage or something like this. But a lot of places on a professional level, they don't have a lot of options anyways, to kind of go
Right.
that route unless they're just foregoing all of it and spraying, abamectin and myclobutanil and do not care about the vast majority of people smoking and consuming it. So
Oh,
in that case it's different, I suppose. I have to do a
yeah.
little bit more work there. If they even
Yeah.
deign to tell me, because that happens too, where you didn't find out, and I walked right through your grow, and then I look at the bottle and go,
Eh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, there's a lot more being done as far as controls well, not using systemics on cannabis, you know.
You're over in Spain, right? Like I
Yeah.
was talking with Stefan and I and yours mutual friend Javier, and
Oh yeah, Javi. Yeah, yeah.
Javi, he was asking for help, and I was saying, do you guys have neem? You have like a neem product that you can apply or something for like powdery mildew, actually.
Yeah.
He's like, actually, no, I don't think I can get it in Spain. I was like, wow. It's
Yeah,
funny
yeah.
because I see a lot of research from Europe about how good neem can be as an alternative. And it's one reason in our article I bring up about how like regulation's a big thing. People might know there's a good solution and it's not and as far as we can tell it's safe, but because they're not allowed to use it, they're now
Right.
caught in a pickle, right? So that's unfortunate as well.
The controls change all over all the countries. All the states in America have a different
Right.
chemical controls. Yeah, it's in fact I know companies that have hired somebody that just deal with the inspectors and getting past the inspector. It's quite difficult. So a lot of people, what I always recommend to people is they have a pesticide container that they spray pesticides with. Uh, a herbicide container that they spray herbicides with if you use them, and then a fungicide container. And you don't mix them up and you mark them clearly. You make different colors, and it works, Yeah, there was an old story about Safers I read a long time ago. Safer soap, they mixed a batch. It was when they were purchased, and they mixed a batch of Safer soap, but in a previous batch they mixed a herbicide in there, and they'd broken a real basic rule. For some reason, it was scheduling or something, and quite a few plants died, quite a few fields of crops, but quite a few. There was lawsuits involved in that.
Human error is a bitch.
Yeah, so it's a real just that one. So, and those are real simple things that you're talking about too,
Well, you put your
speaking of-
trust in that system too, right? So like I know some people are also reacting to my mentioning of neem, for example, and like here's an example. For me, I worked with somebody who was getting pyrethrin products. I'm very curious of Marcus's point here, so I'll be very rapid. But
Oh, don't worry about my
basically,
point.
we took what?
I said, don't worry about my point.
Okay. Well, basically, we've been using this pyrethrin product for a long time. It was fine. It was safe. It was good. But then one day, apparently they had given us the wrong product in the same container, like a drum, and nobody knew. Nobody knew. Everyone, and it came back hot, right? Because they test. And they're like, what is this? What happened? Nothing changed. And it was just an error on their side. What's the
Right.
repercussion for
Right.
this?
Crop
Or
loss.
sometimes neem products get a spray down with something really noxious, and then those neem products get used to make neem sprays, and then people go hot. That happened to some people too. So even if you're trying to
Oh,
use
really? Now,
natural
I didn't
products,
know about that one.
yeah,
Where it's sprayed on the like the neem tree, and then after that the neem tree is made into, or they make oil out of that tree, and there's a residual there that hangs.
exactly.
Ooh,
So that would
ooh.
suck. That would suck a lot,
Yeah, that really
right?
sucked.
So yeah. And like so for example, just so I can assuage any concerns here, I'm not saying people should be spraying neem oil in flour or things like that. In fact, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because it hasn't been published yet, but I have a paper coming out where I'm first author with a great team of people who are we're doing a literature review on neem products in general, their toxicity, and how it relates to cannabis and what might be appropriate or not appropriate based on that research. Unfortunately, not a whole lot of research in cannabis, so we have to then extrapolate from
Okay.
that. And so,
Sure.
so I'm super excited about that. I think people are right to be skeptical. Also, there's different kinds of neem products. There's
And
purely azadirachtin products, so that's a very the primary molecule people extract out of neem for insects because it affects them in a very significant way, even at parts per billion level, which is pretty outrageous.
whoa. Yeah.
So you wouldn't really, it'd be very hard. People have been eating neem leaves in soups and stews and other foods in India for like 8,000 years.
Yeah.
People would burn neem. I'm not saying again, this is not people should spray neem on their flour and don't worry about smoking and inhaling it. That's not what I'm saying. But to its credit, people have also like literally mashed up like neem material into like rods, burned them, and then got the mosquitoes away. And they would, of course, inhale this, and there's incense and
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's
you know,
there's
it's
the urban legend that neem causes hyperemesis syndrome. So that's like in people's cannabis psyches, whether it's completely false, which of course I'm sure it is, but
It
that
is.
is a part of people's belief system. When they hear neem now, they think, oh, I know for a fact that that can cause this. So I think it's probably where a lot of the neem
Dr.
hate
Ethan
comes from.
Russo dispelled that exponentially by showing the toxicity symptoms between neem and CHS, which are completely different. So, I mean, it just took basic science to dissuade that. But I agree, Bubble Man, it is become like one of those things that evolved through
lore.
smoking circles. It is just a urban myth now that
It's
that
urban
assumption
myth.
is there.
Yeah.
I have a question.
What before you ask your question, because
Okay.
I've been sitting on this because
Yes,
Jorge
yeah.
started with, when he started the Neem story, he said, this goes way back now. But then Matthew said something about getting caught in a pickle, and I thought, where's that statement come from? Caught in a pickle. So I did a quick little search, and apparently it comes from the idea of vegetables or meat being submerged and trapped in pickle brine. And the phrase was popularized by none other than Shakespeare in The Tempest around 1611, when Alonso asks, "How canst thou in this pickle?" Trippy. I thought it was trippy. I thought it was trippy. So there it is.
I thought you were going to go in a different direction with that. That was a much more wholesome ending.
Yeah, no, it was just hey, I thought we were going for facts here today. We are just trying to like
Right.
No, I like
cut through
that.
the
I
bullshit.
like
All
that.
right. All right. Well, it's going along the facts line. So, Matt, Stefan, and Jorge, one of the strongest themes in your article is record keeping, right? Which is something that some of us do, but I've known more who don't than actually do. But of course,
Me
now in a
too.
level of professionality, that's expected. So, have you analyzed enough grow data to identify common early indicators that a control strategy is beginning to fail before visible crop damage occurs? And it sort of falls along the lines of a deeper question: what metrics should growers prioritize?
Hmm.
So I for one thing, I think the honest answer is that no one person probably has what I would consider to be a really good amount of data on this. So I would love in the future for this to be more readily, collated and published and that kind of stuff. And I think we're working towards that too. So I don't even think that'll take very long. It might even be in the works already by certain groups. Certainly, private entities maybe are already doing this. But as far as like indicators or like things that are an issue, a lot of it is shared with other agricultural crops, to be quite honest. It's why I find that extrapolation isn't perfect, but it's often really helpful. A lot of the physics is similar. So like, when the seasons, if you live in a place that actually has seasons, and it isn't just hot and hotter like where I live, apparently, um, then you oftentimes there are various pests that change during that weather. Like spider mites famously are associated with dry, hot weather. Powdery mildews also, here's another one. Like people will say if you lower the humidity, then, I've heard this a lot. People are like, oh, I keep my humidity low for powdery mildew. And it's like, well, research has shown, and I don't have the slide with me, but when the video finally comes out, you could check out some of that info, or I could screenshot it right now. I guess if people are curious to see the data, I might do that. But basically, powdery mildews, they can germinate under like 20% humidity. You're probably not lowering it to that
Always
level.
show data, Matt. We're all fucking cannabis nerds, so
Yeah,
whip
we're
out
here
some
for it.
data,
All
dude.
right.
Sorry,
I think we're here for
yeah,
it.
sorry.
That's
For
good.
sure.
That's good.
You,
Well,
you're
okay,
with
then
your
I'll
people here. We want to see real data because I mean this is a real world thing. Is what do they need to focus on? Because if there's becomes to be a certain early indicators, those are real, tangents that, farmers are looking for. Because by the time you see white powdery mildew on your plants, it's already too late.
Yes, it is way too late. And so I'm loading up Adobe Premiere right now. I'm gonna go scan through the video and find it. But I wanted to give something to chew on while I do that, which is that like the reason why what do I want to say here? Well, the other thing is that like the seasons will change, right? In a lot of places, and the winds will change too. And so like thrips and powdery mildews and russet mites also, for crops that get them. Um, they're often associated with the windier seasons of those regions because whether by spore or thrips, which are often known as thunderbugs, because, or at least they used to be known that way in parts of England, because they're associated with the barometric pressure changes. And so the winds change regarding that. And so they come in on these plumes of air, sometimes from great distances. Spores do that as well. So it's a question of how much of it are you exposed to? If you're out in the open, probably a lot. If you're contained, probably a lot less. And then genetic resistance comes to this factor too, because maybe your resistance is, whatever we want to say is above average to some degree to these powdery mildews that you're dealing with. But if you get 10,000 spores a day versus 10 spores a day, and the resistance destroys the 10 spores it deals with, but maybe not all of the 10,000 that come towards it, then it's a statistics game, in that case. So let me go find that data for you.
So have you read some of the stuff that Kevin McKernan's put out about the spores and how they hook into the leaf itself? And there was this idea that it once was systemic, if you will. What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
Oh yeah, powdery mildew is not systemic, but and I have some. Did I put this in the? I knew this would come up. Did I put this in the presentation? I did not.
Well, you could talk through it, but it's like,
I
I
will
think
talk
it's
through it.
important.
No, it's a great.
Yeah.
Well, since I'm here, it's also on this video, so that's why I bring it up. Yeah, so I'll bring this data up too. But no, so powdery mildews, they only colonize the epidermal layer. So a systemic pathogen would be more something like Fusarium or other necrotrophs like Pythium that can go through the tissues. It can go into the root tissue, into the leaf tissue in a lot of cases, or stem tissue through wounds. And they systemically move through the tissues. So and
those
usually
are
they destroy.
Hostoria? Is that Hostoria that it sends through into the cells? What is it?
Oh yeah.
What are the feeding structures that they're sending?
So like with powdery mildews, here, I'll just do this.
Yeah.
How about that?
Because this is something I always wondered. They create like hyphae, don't they? Like feeding structures?
Yes, they do. So
And
basically,
am I wrong in the term?
Well, they're definitely not. No. A Hostorium is, so the Hostorium is a organ. It's an organ that powdery mildews produce and certain other sort of epiphytic fungi produce that parasitize or colonize in a beneficial way plants. So a Hostorium is this organ. It's the root of the fungus, in that's where the nutrient exchange happens with the cells. That's parasitizing in the case of powdery mildew. But when necrotrophs like Fusarium or Pythium and these kinds of things, when they colonize, they don't really do that. They basically trigger the self-destruct response in plant cells. In fact, it's the self-destruct response that plant cells use to defeat powdery mildews and their kin that use this technique, because they need the plant to be alive. They cannot parasitize dead tissue. They cannot feed on dead tissue. Necrotrophs can. They're systemic. Powdery mildews don't. They would kill the plant, and then they would die too quickly, or at least they didn't evolve to do this, because they evolved from, remember, symbionts. They evolved from things that had a at least neutral to positive kind of interaction, and that they communicated with the plant on a very fundamental level, like mycorrhizae do. But then they got so used to, and this is a big part of the video, if people are interested in this, I think it sort of informs some myths and misconceptions about powdery mildews and also plant health in general, which is that like a parasite can become a mutualist, or a mutualist can become a parasite, both via just context changing, like if the plant or the symbiont doesn't provide nutrients enough because they can't get to them, or some other factor, or the environment is stressing them out, then they'll take more from the plant than they give. And that way you have a parasitic interaction rather than a mutualistic complementary factor, if that makes sense.
But to your point, this powdery mildew, it's growing on the plant surface. It's sending these feeding structures into individual epidermal cells. It's not traveling through the vascular system like a truly systemic pathogen.
Exactly.
Right.
that is true. That is true. And so yeah, it's not a systemic pathogen in this way. And I would call it not systemic. You look at, it's very commonly depicted in like phytopathological research. There's nobody who ever says otherwise, basically. And it makes sense to me. Here is, let's see. I do have that information for you.
We'll take it.
We'll take it. We'll take it. Ask me another question.
We'll take a dab while we're taking that information, while we're taking more answers from a question. I feel like
So during flower, Matt,
there it is.
What would you recommend? Like, let's say, someone's like, oh man, got some issues. That's not oil based. Like what would you what strategies would you kind of implement there for those?
What's your goal?
Well, let's
What's the
say I'm trying to
context of
think
this
of like what could be
situation?
useful for a listener right now. Let's say it's, it's outdoor season, right? It's good low-hanging fruit. A lot of people across the United States right now are growing their outdoor plants. It's going into flower right now. It's getting wet, just cooler at night. As you get into your flowering stage, what would be a strategy to implement for PM? And let's say maybe botrytis or gray mold.
Just the plague. What would you say?
Just the
if
plague.
you-
what are the-
both mold problems. Well, I would
Well,
say
like,
they require very different solutions.
Right. Yeah.
So you'd probably and that's also part of the Everswarm point, is that it's not a
Yeah.
Bruce Lee flick, right?
Totally.
The bad guy doesn't come out of the group and honorably duel him once. Badoom, he's done. Badoom, he's
Yeah.
done. You're getting 5 pests maybe at one time, 3 pests, 10 pests maybe at different times.
Yep.
So it's not enough to be like, oh, well, I have a solution in each vacuum. You have to have something that complements. And I liked your question earlier that kind of went into that point where what do you do if you got biocontrols and then something that's incompatible with biocontrols, like a spray you have to do, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
That's
like,
kind
for
of what I'm
me-
asking here. It's like in flower, how would you approach these things? Because they're, look, they come often one after another or as old as one another, right? Sometimes too. That's another aspect that isn't talked about
Great question.
enough.
Yeah, this
Um,
time of year, right, Colin? A lot of people coming into the outdoor harvest, personal or bigger.
Yep.
So preemptive
really-
to what mildews and botrytis and yeah.
Blight comes to mind to me. It's just that there's, what could someone think about, I guess, from your lens, I guess, that could be helpful for the listener. I don't know. I'm just curious as
I'm
to what
thinking
you
a
would think.
jerry can, $5 worth of gasoline,
Yeah.
a pack of matches.
No, it's and again, this is preventative, right? Because this is the time to start.
This is before you have any powdery mildew, right?
Before you have anything. This isn't like,
Okay.
oh my God, Mom, I'm gonna blow it up like Marcus just suggested. Because yes, at that point, it's like, where's the match in the gas can?
Before
Right.
it
You know what I mean?
happens, yes,
Yeah.
preemptive.
So I'm actually coming from a preventative point of view. You've got maybe you've done everything right, in so to speak, whatever that means, for you in your environment. I'm growing outside. It's what's today's date? It's the 23rd of August. Some plants are in the second or third week of flower. How would I do that? I guess.
So, okay. Well, I want to say one caveat before, which is that if we just expand the scenario out just a tid to like, oh, well, hope like I would prefer if we had access to like if you had plants that are quantitatively resistant to powdery mildew, or they've done well in these trials or had these resistances, that might be like a pre-example. Like, okay, I already got some plants that are verified this way. They'll have a better time of it. All things being equal. Okay, so that's one aspect, but you're not there yet. But I just want to put that in there since I
Sure.
think it'd be
Genetic
useful for other
selection.
people next season. Yeah.
Yeah.
So try to get
Yeah.
a source if you can, and then, but moving in, you've got flower, you've got your plants. It's you're moving into this point. Well, assuming like everyone has different regulations, I'm going to eschew all the details of that. I'm going to eschew all of these sorts of aspects that would complicate it, and just talk about sort of my experiences in the various arenas, which are very different from each other. But basically, there are products like, like potassium bicarbonate you might apply or get to maybe apply it potentially. But the thing about a product like this is that I think you would still affect, the floral tissue and that kind of a thing. So like you might consider like if you're so there's not going to be a toxic, or at least in the places where it's allowed, it's deemed that it's not going to be a problem in this case. And from my understanding of the chemistry, it's kind of like what Brian was talking about with regards to pH. That's a major mode of action. So you don't have to worry about like toxication. You don't have to worry about like a systemic activity or like residuals in the tissue in this way. So that might be so that's like an extreme example, like Jorge was saying, in invasivity, on the invasivity scale, I don't want to do this, but you might have that as an option if you want to shore it up.
So like
But
a
then the
mill
other
stop.
thing,
It's a product
like a
out
mill
there
stop,
that,
exactly.
yeah, like mill
Yeah.
stop comes to mind.
If you have
Got it.
access to these sorts of things, I think it might be a possible consideration. Again, it really depends on what you're trying to do at the end of the day. If some of that QC is not as important, you need it for health reasons, and it
Mhm.
won't hurt you, then I think that's a pretty safe option.
Got it.
But
So,
if you're trying to grow hash and every trichome matters and the dynamics of that really matter, then I might not recommend that, for example. So I just wanted to
well,
have that diversity.
as opposed to, we all are selecting for, the best necessarily producers, could then from these problems that are the Everswarm reality, could breeding for diverse inducible immune responses be more sustainable than selecting for single resistant traits?
Yes, but they're more complex. It's much more complicated. And also, you might not. Here's the other thing. In other crops, I want to answer Colin's question because I think it's probably most valuable to everyone if I do. But this part is also a very big part of it, which is that in other crops, people will make resistant varieties, but then they won't have the flavors or the other growth parameters. Maybe it doesn't grow as fast. And maybe what you did or the genes might not even be related, but it just happens to be the case. So then you have to refine that aspect to continue. And then the other thing is that sometimes the genes are related. I remember talking with somebody when I worked in Gerbera cut flowers and roses. The guy came over and he told me about how he said the longevity of the rose, and this might not be true anymore, but he said that at least for the varieties he deals with, the longevity of the rose and the potency and amount of time that the rose is odorous are inverse. So you can't have or at least he couldn't find one that was a long-lasting rose that also had lots of that rose odor that people like, that nice aroma. So these kinds of things also play into the breeding as well. And we don't even really have a lot of answers for that either, I think, that I'm publicly aware of, anyways. The silicon example from before, from that presentation earlier, I think something like that could be useful. Absolutely. And it would be something that you could apply again, maybe not at the point that you said, like, like week 3 of flower or whatever, I think you need a little bit more time for it to be effective and probably in the very beginning of the growing season. But that might also be an example that I think would be really useful, and also pretty cheap. There are
Matt,
microbes as well that you can use. Bacillus subtilis was mentioned. There's a Bacillus amyloliquefactions. That's a really commonly found in products as well that you could apply. Again, you could apply this pre-flowering even as well. And I think that would be useful too. And I'm trying to remember, you mentioned botrytis as well. There are also pathogens or bacteria and fungi that are either mycoparasitic to fungi like powdery mildew or botrytis. And
so
then
the
other ones.
Bacillus family.
Yes, bacillus, but there's also like a few other ones.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and there's different
Trichoderma
strains. There's definitely
uh,
different strains, but
okay.
that would be another example. There's some of these microbes that you could apply preventatively. Now, if you still get it, this is where the rubber meets the road, right? Because at this point, again, like I said, I'm very reticent to apply anything, and even the examples I give that are supposed to be safe, I think they still have trade-offs that is not always relevant to people. And I know I'm taking a long
Yeah.
time to kind of answer this question, but it's because I'm going to be lanced if I make
I have
if I
another
make
one
a,
to make
if I
it
make a
No,
longer.
mistake on
no,
the internet. Do
it,
you
It's a
understand?
great answer. It's a
I
little
hope I
think
teed
obvious.
it
also,
up in the right ways, man. I'm
but it's
trying, I'm just,
complicated.
yeah,
It's
it is,
complicated.
but you're
You're
doing a
right
good
though.
job. So
That's
Yeah,
okay.
no.
You are doing a great job.
I'm actually, I hope it doesn't
Thank
come across that I'm actually a flooder. I actually like that this question is being asked because it's complex. It's based on what you're trying to do, which I've probably said
you.
4 or 5 times now, but
but so let's be clear. So you did say it. Look, if you're going to be using Millstop and you're after great resin, probably not the product for you, right?
I think
Is
no
that
product.
well, the thing is like the Bacillus family might be the product that you may need to use and things like cease,
Sure,
products like that,
sure.
right? And that's what I'm trying to get after here is like if you can't use oils, which you really, I think Marcus agrees, is tough to use because even at the smallest point in the plant's life, it's still producing these heads, and they do, you know, travel through the life cycle of the plant no matter we like it or not. So that's a thing, but no, so you did say it, so don't feel like you're gonna get lanced over here. You're
No.
good.
And I think well, it's a point of like great. It's a point of like what like if you want like if you're like, oh, this has to go perfectly, I want every single trichome. Maybe you're a
Yeah.
home grower and you only have like 3 plants and you're like, I want to make everything count. I'm supportive of this perspective where maybe what you do is you cut it out, or cut out some of this like you also mentioned botrytis, which is a little bit different than powdery mildew. I've mostly been
Yeah,
talking in the powdery mildew context. But
sure.
I want to say that, like, yeah, sometimes what you have to do is, and that's why I said rubber meets the road, because I think sometimes, like, the answer is going to include some culling that sometimes people are uncomfortable hearing,
Yes.
as well. So I think that's also a part of it, because, like, maybe you would rather have, and everyone's different, but maybe you would rather have it so that, like, you just cut it out, you spray some of the microbes and that kind of a thing. So you reduce the harm to the tissue that you're going to harvest and then process, however that's going to happen. At the same time, though, sometimes you have to make command decisions, like maybe it's later in the flower and you're about to harvest. So maybe you're like, I'd rather just not spray anything, cut out whatever I see as a problem. And then you know what I'm saying? So like
Yeah.
for example, you might lean towards that, and maybe it would be a waste of time, energy, resources, and also trichomes to do any sort of treatment in
Sure.
that context, for example. But you said earlier, like week 3, flowers, so you still have some time in that case.
Hey Matt,
Yeah, yeah.
if I can slide in, what do you know or what do you feel about alkaline foliar? So the same alkalinity, but on a surface application through water, like, bringing up the as far as high pH water, just water alone. Is that of any benefit, or is that going to help or fight or resist and getting used to the
What
surface of the leaf?
Well, actually, I'm glad you brought that up because it goes with the other question that you were asking me for evidence of earlier. So let me just get that to you real quick, because I've heard of things like there's like special like water like electrolyzed water things you can get supposedly,
Filters
but
even, yeah. Yep,
yeah,
inexpensive.
but like I've always found those to be I mean, maybe they work for some people, but I don't know if they're always the best. For one thing, water actually kills powdery mildew spores, not the colonies, but it kills the
Yeah,
spores
right.
themselves pretty readily. So they're actually very harmed by this.
Yeah, cool.
There's a product called Terra Vera as well, Matt.
Waterworks.
Yeah. I mean, water works. Water works in the case that it will drown spores, but then the humidity that results after that
Yes.
um, will help a colony that does germinate or might already be germinating. And like in nature, that's what happens. Like the rain kills a bunch of spores airborne and coming off of the structures, but then afterwards, the extra humidity gives them a boost.
Uh,
So, you know what I mean? So it's like that.
sure, it's a cycle.
It's a cycle, right? Sorry,
Well,
I'm a
what
little
about
bit
So then like more, excuse me, water applied and then an indoor environment anyway with then a quick dry enough on it so it doesn't have time to hang out with the humidity after the water, the foliar type of thing, like a
I
quick
mean,
correction to
I
dry.
mean, I'm not sure if it's a treatment strategy. I would like endorse like to just apply water as a powder because usually you're
Sure.
applying it when you see the colony itself. At that point, this probably wouldn't be relevant. But like with the alkaline water stuff, I'm reticent to be to like recommend people like go out and buy an electrolyzer or use that
Electrolyte.
as like a major aspect of their treatment necessarily.
Cool.
But the potassium bicarbonate does have a pH effect. So
Yes.
perhaps you could replicate that pH
Yeah, that's
effect
fine.
with an electrolyzed water. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I see. So both together as far as bicarb with the
Oh
electrolyzed
no,
water,
I mean that the one
either
might
or.
justify the one might explain why the other could work.
Okay.
You
I
know,
see.
like yeah, but I think in those cases you can go both directions, right? So I would rather go the direction that's represented by the potassium bicarbonate.
Ah,
Um,
why
yeah.
is that?
Well, just because it already is shown to work and doesn't have a negative effect. Whereas if you go in a very base um, direction, that might be caustic potentially.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and then here's the information since people were asking about it. Yes. So this is from a study looking at strawberries in wind tunnels or in like growing tunnels. And they found that basically there was still germination. So like for people so these graphs here are showing like, for example, here the germination of conidia, which are spores, and relative humidity, the relationship here. The relationship between spore germination and VPD. Spore germination, absolute humidity, which is not relative humidity, it's the humidity on or basically at the leaf surface, not air, not general air humidity. And we have relative humidity. Then we have VPD again, and then we have absolute humidity. But I think it's a different I think this is a different group here. But the point I'm trying to draw here, they actually made 2 points. One thing they said was that actually relative humidity, at least for strawberry powdery mildew, was more reliable as an indicator than VPD. And I remember that explicitly being said in this paper. And the logic they used was that it's easier to kind of follow because it's just one dynamic. And they found that VPD was about the same anyways, and it's a more complicated, you know, it's multiple factors being kind of synthesized into one abstraction, right? Vapor pressure deficit is a function of humidity, temperature, right? And so they found that it really wasn't worth it, at least in this here, from this context, it might be better to just you know, track humidity. But even at 10% humidity, there was still a 10 to 20% spore development success. And at 50% humidity, you had 15 to 25%. So, like, you know, most people aren't even getting to these numbers, in my experience, usually, but they're still viable. And so I just wanted to show that that was possible and that that was the case. And it's probably true for many other powdery mildews. Um, and then for what's happening when powdery mildews are colonizing, because Marcus had asked about the Haustorium here. So this is like the root. So this is like an epidermal cell, right? And the powdery mildew, this is a colony that's already developed, but the long and short of it is that in an incompatible interaction, the powdery mildew penetrates the cell wall here, and during this process, it's already affecting like the genetic programming of the plant, actually. It's already suppressing the plant in many ways, the plant cell itself. What it doesn't want is it doesn't want the plant cell to basically destroy itself, called a hypersensitive reaction or hypersensitive response in older literature. People might have heard that term. Um, so the powdery mildew is suppressing the plant's immune response because what it does is it destroys the cell, and then therefore the sporling that's developing doesn't have enough resources. Kind of like a seed. If you were to take it out of the soil, it can't get any more nutrients. And maybe it can grow for a little bit because it has some stored energy from its parent, but ultimately, if it doesn't get enough sun, it will die. And so the same is true for powdery mildew. If it doesn't get enough nutrients from the plant and the plant is able to react strongly and somehow is not affected by this immune suppression, then what happens is this papilla forms, this sort of like encasement. And the powdery mildew basically can't go further and it dies. That's one really critical step for breeders and growers, I think, to focus on when it comes to resistance, if they're able to have the resources to actually track these interactions. But then if the powdery mildew is able to grow, then you have a much more complicated situation here. So now what happens is that the Haustorium is, at this point, the powdery mildew has already probably very comprehensively suppressed the plant cell's development. So the manipulation is so precise that it even has special proteins that unblocks its own proteins when it wants to shunt a bunch of nutrients towards the mildew. So it basically takes every single little step of the way and it blocks it from happening, and then it undoes it when it needs those things to happen. Essentially, it's complicated in this way. Plants will produce little callose, little like woody, basically woody blocks inside the plant cell, and it will attach them to the Haustorium and choke it out. Essentially, that's how powdery mildews try to colonize. And then the last thing I wanted to say from what Marcus was saying earlier, because you were asking about systemic, and I've seen people bring up endoparasitism with powdery mildews because maybe they looked up powdery mildews and they read some papers, which I think is awesome. I think these questions inspiring people to look up this information is a good thing, but I want to demystify it a little bit. There's basically almost no powdery. This is a list of powdery mildews on the left, and I've color coded it here between the endoparasitic ones that are blue and then yellow, this very special one. And then the other ones are all what we call ectoparasitic. They're all biotrophs. So they need living tissue and they colonize only the epidermis. But in these endoparasitic examples, they don't even become systemic. They just colonize a little bit further, or they might colonize the stomata here. So this yellow one here, Levulula taurica, here, it actually will, unlike other powdery mildews, move through the stomata and penetrate that way physically and bypass the plant cell. And so as it goes inside, then it will penetrate the just a little bit lower cells. And the only powdery mildews that do these are ones that are adapted to arid environments. And it kind of makes sense. They need to get in there quickly, and the stomata might actually be open or be a weak point for the plant. And maybe the waxes and cell walls are a little bit too rigid. That could also be a factor in its evolution down this road. But basically, powdery mildews don't do this for the most part. And do I have anything else that's important for that point? Oh, I guess I'll just make one last point here. Oh, or here's an example of this precision I was talking about. This is in barley powdery mildew, but it's very similar in other plants. All of these numbers and letters here, these are all different proteins it produces. This line here means it basically impairs what it's connecting to. So when the powdery mildew is detected, the plant cell under normal conditions, there's a process that goes from these different organs in the cell to the vacuole that stores water, and then it basically reaches a threshold and then it kills itself. It destroys itself to deny its resources to the powdery mildew. Okay, our own bodies do this too, right? Sometimes when we get infected with a pathogen. But after this is all happening before this Haustorium even comes into the picture, okay? And then when the Haustorium comes in, then it releases a different set of proteins that undo different aspects of this process so that it can then shunt a bunch of nutrients, like I was saying earlier. So that's like what we're dealing with. So when we talk about like breaking this relationship, it's very complicated, and powdery mildews that don't do this will just die. So of course the successful ones do it really well. And if you thought, and I've also heard people talk about chitin and chitosan and using that to prime the immune system. I almost brought this up earlier, But like in cucumber powdery mildew and certain other powdery mildews, they have these little proteins here, like this one, PXL-PMO1. And what they do is they take the chitin on the fungus's body, right? The fungal cells are made out of chitin, just like insect cells are, or their exoskeletons. And plants have evolved to recognize that as a potential threat. And they have little receptors here, this CM-Circ1. And the long story short is that various powdery mildews will actually produce proteins that degrade their own chitin and turn it into chitosan, which is actually not um, received by the receptor. It's too small, so it doesn't bind with the receptor. And so it's able to basically cloak itself in sort of a molecular stealth. And like, again, it's if you want to give your plants like all the nutrients it needs, if you want to give it all the health that you want to give it, all these healthful factors, that's all great and good. But if the plant can't actually detect its adversary, then those nutrients aren't going to get mobilized. The weapons aren't going to get produced, if that makes sense. So yeah, so that was.
Could it
So I
go
thought
the
that was kind
other
of
way
interesting.
that was interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Could it go the other way for over? For like where you just said adding the fertility, adding the nutrient value. Again, like earlier we were talking, excuse me again, that people are overdoing it at times. So would you find that to be a even further adverse effect from over fertilizing, where it maybe invites in the pathogen quicker?
I think it can definitely happen. I think that
Much
also
nicer.
I think yes, people talk about this like with bricks, for example, or like if you have enough nitrogen or too much nitrogen, or if the plant doesn't process supposedly the nitrogen enough, then you can run into problems. One of the issues with that though is that plants aren't gods or angels. They make waste. And so waste nitrogen products do exist and they are in the plant and they do have to be processed. And that's like a physics aspect of the case that can't be done totally. So I've heard people make those kinds of claims. But I don't know to what degree that they're super effective there. When we consider this point, I think that there's going to be a slight, there's going to be nitrogen in the system essentially. If you're thinking that that won't be a problem. But I wanted to bring this up, which is that this is like basically a diagram that shows that different pests will trigger different immune responses. I think most people here have heard of jasmonic acid and salicylic acid. These are plant hormones and plant hormone pathways. So like, for example, caterpillars and necrotrophs, like Fusarium, like we talked about earlier, botrytis, they will stimulate a jasmonic acid reaction in the plant. And if the plant's reaction is competent, then it will also have a quicker response or already be primed for a period of time, maybe days, maybe weeks, maybe hours, for similar pests. Because if you encountered one, you're probably going to encounter multiple. There's a problem, though, and like what you said with nutrients. Jasmonic acid signaling and salicylic acid signaling are diametrically opposed. So if you prime your plant in one direction, you're going to damage its ability to respond for another kind of pest, like aphids and biotrophs, like powdery mildews. So I hear people say this like in regenerative spaces and living soil spaces, that they're priming the plant. That's a good thing. But how are you priming the plant? And what are the potential side effects? Again, that's trade-offs. The plant's physical changes and chemical changes that go in one direction can't go in the other direction as easily. And so there's a monkey wrench problem when you prime a plant. Even things like mycorrhizae will prime a plant in one direction, which is good for certain pests, but it might actually make the plant susceptible to other pests. And I know this is very controversial to a lot of people, but
You find a diverse microbial structure would be the one, or something that would actually, go away from just that one specific mono microbial, like say like Bacillus combo I see with heavier mycorrhiza, but with Bacillus strains, some that I don't know of, but then a little bit of trichoderma on the end, say combination.
I like the way you put it because it's way more precise than sometimes I hear other people say it. Because I think if you just say diversity, it doesn't mean anything. and it could be anything. But if you're talking about sort of like product, like first of all, you don't even know if you take multiple beneficial microbes like you're talking about that are known individually to do really well, they may work really well together, they may not. That's also a thing that, and they might not work with your other microbes that you've already colonized or added. Maybe they have a nutrient or a plant growth promoting factor that you rely on. There's some really fascinating stuff in cannabis that's being shown too. And so my answer to you is yes, but with an asterisk. And I think that asterisk needs to be investigated more so that we have a way better,
Yeah.
much more informed microbial consortium. And I'm excited for that.
I'd feed back a little info again from this smaller garden is that besides the pH, and it seemed to be in effect with that, which you would know more likely, but the ammonium nitrate release from the microbial population seemed to be something that I was looking into, we were looking into, where not for sure again, but kind of asking even, it seemed like even the heavy compost tea regimen I was on, which was very hyphae rich and structured the same way every time, even for years, that I got kind of concerned or thinking towards maybe this is mono colony. And like you're saying, yeah, where it's doing good
Maybe.
things for one aspect, but then it also seemed to be maybe affecting the pH of the soil for good living soil, where the microbes have a release, like you said, they're not gods or angels, or you mentioned that. I like that saying.
I'm glad you'll appreciate that. I hope that wasn't too
Thank
weirdly
you.
convoluted. Yeah.
No, at first I'm like, what's going on? But that was well said. Yeah, we're all alive, and they have a cycle as well for off gassing. I was almost calling it burping or off gassing the colonies. So
Respiring. Yeah.
I think besides higher pH to feedback in from a small garden again, and indoor wise, at least tracking it more, seem like diversity of microbial population. I talked to Colin a little bit too in the last couple years with, say, Root Shield mentioned, and learning more about trichoderma. And as of late,
Yes.
seeing higher pH with good in check support for the mycorrhiza. Can't exactly know all the different strains. You could probably mention a lot of them, and then into some bacillus with the smaller portioning of the trichoderma at the end, and that recipe with pH maintained in the living in really good organic living soil seems to be working for now.
That's great. I mean, like for example, with trichoderma, you brought up there's different species and different strains of those species. And some of them are more broadly, like even Beauveria bassiana, which goes after a lot of insects and other arthropods, like I love it. But, I will say that in order to be intellectually honest, it's kind of a broad spectrum biocontrol. It colonizes a lot of different insects, maybe even insects you don't want to colonize. So and with trichoderma, similarly, might colonize a lot of pathogenic fungi, those that are parasitic in that way. Some of them might just excrete antagonistic compounds, and that kind of thing. And so, I just feel like people should know that maybe it might even parasitize good fungi that you don't want to be colonized and that kind of, or maybe they're just not at a population where it matters. Like with the pH example, you take a pH reading, it's an abstraction. What's happening in the funk is maybe a little bit more diverse, a little bit more interesting. But the plants are growing good, maybe even better than normal, that's a pretty good sign, right? So I definitely think that those signals are also valid, right?
Soft data. Yeah.
Yeah,
Agreed.
absolutely. That part has to matter too, right?
Hey, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not gonna hire the person again when they're like, oh, well, you did all the consortium, right? But the plants don't look good.
Yeah,
Like,
I've heard this and I've read that. You're like, well, have you done it? Have you applied it? What have you seen, from the
right,
field?
exactly.
Seems like you're
Yeah.
hitting both the micro to macro, but this is great. Thank you
I'm really
Yeah.
happy that you liked it. I appreciate it.
very much.
Brian's like, this is a personal consulting gig for me, so I'm just quite loving
Yeah.
it. Hey, listen, what do you think of
I
me
think
pick
it's
your
great
brain.
levels. I can tell it could go way far out that would lose me. I'm more like my mom than dad, so not as much science behind, but I'm able to follow along. So that's
Yeah,
what's
I
thank you.
think I think it's important for me to also not like kind of baffle with maybe not bullshit, but like things that are very complicated. and it's be like, oh, just believe me, the science. Oh,
Gotcha.
what are
Okay.
polynomials? But as a biology minded person, I also am very afraid of mathematics in general. So like there's people who know even better than me about this stuff who've done the like biostats and the things, and I really respect it. I've worked with these people. I don't think they're not part of a cabal of people trying to lie to me about plant nutrients or whatever. A lot of them really love their job and appreciate what they're doing. And I'm really excited for this sort of complementarism that will happen. I hope hopefully soon, where these professionals, these ag professionals, can then kind of mate with our industrial knowledge and homegrown knowledge, and it can do a lot better. And so I hope that happens sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Well said. What well said. Well, I'm amazed at how fast we blazed through the first 3 hours of this show. I blinked and it was pretty much over. People were tripping out in the chat for a while too. They were like, "What? No, it can't be. How did that happen so fast?" Good information is always well received. It makes time go by, at least the perception of time going by a lot quicker than slower. So that was awesome. Very
Glad.
good. And we got an hour left.
Outstanding, Matt.
Well, I appreciate it. I do have a few. I have a few more slides that have to do with some of the themes of the article that I think would be interesting.
Yeah, please. Yeah, we got time.
Yeah, let me get them out for us. Because I think one of the not criticisms, one of the questions I got a lot from people had to do with like basically like okay, IPM chemicals, as you guys said, and what I really appreciate people saying was that it's way more than that. That's very nice looking. When we met, Marcus, you had some great stuff. I don't think I mentioned it the last time I was on here, but I really appreciated your hospitality when we met a couple of years ago at this point. Some good
Yeah,
stuff.
no, that was great. We went to Kobe's.
We did go to Kobe's.
We went to Kobe's, dude. That's crazy.
It was a very interesting experience at Kobe's for sure.
Yeah, well, that's that place is hardcore.
Okay, so non-chemical examples, right? And what's other aspects of IPM that I think people are sleeping on, which is that, like, here's an example here, right? Okay, so this is from a research report, and in this figure, they're discussing how these budworm moths, the ones that we deal with in cannabis, they oviposit, they deposit eggs on plants. Okay, we already know that part. But what we've also found is that the females will avoid plants that already have eggs or the scents that those eggs make, which are depicted here, like methyl esters of oleic acid and this delightfully named C18-1 ceramide. And so, like, presumably, you'd want to like quantify all this stuff, but presumably you could maybe make a product that had this compound in it, and then spray it on plants and make them avoid your plants, right? So like that would be an example of like behavioral effects. And sure, you might be applying a chemical. You might not even have to apply it to your plants. You maybe could just release it in like some sort of like sort of release mechanism, that like you wet and then like the air kind of wafts it around and you get this like protective effect, perhaps, just as an idea. I don't know anyone who's doing this specific work, but the researchers certainly thought that this was a possible viable strategy. This kind of stuff I think could be really useful, and it doesn't require us to like you said earlier, or like we talked about with powdery mildew, like applying stuff to the plants and that kind of stuff. This is from another research report that looked at a similar thing, but this was a compound called cis-11 hexadecanol that basically female budworms make when they are immature and they can't produce eggs if they mate, right? So the males pick up on this and they'll avoid females that are producing the I'm not ready compound.
So literally nature cock blocking.
Yeah, basically. basically. And so basically what happens is that this compound could be used to interrupt and disrupt mating. And that would also disrupt egg laying and a bunch of other stuff. So things like this could be useful, especially if lots of people used it at once in an area. Because you might not get as much of a protective effect if not enough people use it at once as well. So that's another
Right.
aspect to some of these, and it's actually
But
been
if
a
you're
huge
able to have a
barrier.
large enough regional impact, then you could actually have a real impact, is what you're saying.
100%. It's actually, and like I said, it's a major barrier for their effective use. Like we know that some compounds like these exist. You could research these. Some of them work a lot better than others. Certainly, there's attractants for like bait, but this kind of disruption effect can be super useful, but it does require like mass use to get enough coverage, kind of. But I think it's very exciting as an opportunity, and certainly there's a lot of farmers and growers that grow in the same area, and so getting some kind of like a agreement, like I've seen in other field research, can have great dividends. And then another cool thing for behavior, again, same budworm moth. This is Helicoverpa armigera, which is the close relative of the corn earworm Zea. And what they were showing here was that if they applied yellow light to these greenhouses, then it actually interrupted their nocturnal behavior of flying, drinking juices from fruits and probably nectar from flowers, which they need to live, and then also mating. So this kind of a thing, just by using light, photobiology of the right wavelength, you're not killing them. You're basically telling them that it's daytime, and if you're in here or if you're around here, you should not be looking for something to deposit your eggs. You should not be trying to mate and make eggs. And so this is like literally like, an invisible barrier or a visible barrier, I guess. And I think things like this, I think, are very exciting because it allows people to do other sorts of things. Like, here's an example. I think we were mentioning like plant health claims and like what I might call pop ecology. So, like, this is an example where a claim is being made that with the nutrients that they're using or the specific nutrients they recommend that people have in their plants or from microbes, that they can increase lipid synthesis in the plant. Lipids are important. Lipids power just about everything in organisms that have them as fuel. Like they bring up here, they say extra energy is stored as plant lipids like waxes and oils. I'm not sure a lot of plants use waxes as storage really, but it is true that waxes are produced from them. And that also it would shield them from what they say here very specifically, pectolytic enzymes, so pectin inside the cell walls and around the cellular structure. While that might be true, research has come out to show, maybe to some degree it's true, but powdery mildews actually, they literally break down the chloroplasts in those cells that we just talked about, that they colonize, and they actually do really good if plants produce a whole lot of what are called triacylglycerols or tags. And these are lipids. And what will happen is that through a bunch of processes we don't have to get into, this figure shows here the purple structures are chloroplasts. The green structures are lipid droplets that are produced inside the chloroplasts and are seeping now outside, as we can see in the third image on the right, where they put them two together. And what this is showing in 3D is powdery mildews literally influencing the chloroplasts to break down into lipids, which is where they're produced in the plant, and then they can siphon those lipids out and grow really well. And this was the other thing that we saw earlier. So like, I kind of wanted to bring up two different examples there. The first is that like we can affect things and aspects of the plant, or I'm sorry, excuse me, of the pest, whether it's an insect or even a fungus. In the case of powdery mildew, they have a circadian rhythm too. They have photobiology too. So we can influence these things and maybe have really great dividends just by themselves or when supplemented with other things that work really well. And then also, sometimes claims they sound scientific, like pectolytic and like, oh, that's so great. But powdery mildews produce cutinase, they produce pectinase, they produce cellulase to break down the literal cell walls of cells. a plant cell, so it's more than that. So they might make a partially true claim, but then that claim doesn't really mate with like either new research that might not have been known before, or just generally physiological information that's been known for a long time. And so I just want people to be, even if you agree with them or you like the kinds of things they say, I think it's worth investigating and asking like really tough questions like, why is that? How do you know? What research are you basing this on? Why should I give you my money? Right? Like
No,
it's
you're not wrong.
resources. I
It's pretty
just,
it's pretty quick to uncover bullshit when you start asking questions. It's a lot
Right.
harder to discover when you blindly believe everything you read or hear. Increases terpene production 100x.
Yes, exactly.
All right.
Yeah,
You know
so
what that reminds me of? A
what?
cab driver in Amsterdam who says, "My friend, my friend, my friend." At the third "my friend," I'm convinced this guy is now not my friend.
My friend.
I am now convinced he's not my friend.
Yes,
That's what that reminds me of. Just
a little bit. Yeah, yeah. So I just feel like that kind of thing. I just want to fight. I don't sell products. I don't sell biocontrols. I support their use in the right in the right context, but I don't sell them. I don't sell chemicals. I don't sell nutrients. I don't have a dog in those races. I have a dog in the race of the community just having more information to make decisions with. And maybe sometimes this complicated stuff is not relevant, which is totally good. In fact, I hope for most people it's not relevant. But I think that in a lot of cases it is, or at least it can be.
Well, it's a lot of, energy to produce a cannabis garden, and to think that things aren't going to come and be like, I want some of that energy.
Right. Or like what about food? Like we'll say like, oh, the bugs are eating your plants, must not be healthy. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
right.
do you know what apples looked like naturally? Do you know what wheat,
Listen,
corn, teosinte?
I have a Rastafarian friend in Jamaica, the
Okay.
doctor, and the doctor only ever chose food, whether it was like a piece of cane. He'd make sure that the worm was in it. And I'd be like, why do you eat the ones with the worm? And he's like, that's how I know it's not poisonous. And I was just like, oh my God, this fucking guy has leapfrogged over the common, like he's just got all the common sense in the world. Everyone's looking for the one without the worm, and he's looking for the one with the worm. He's like, I can eat around the worm.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I mean,
okay,
you chop off that part, right?
off that part, exactly. But yeah, it sure made me think. Like with your statement, it made me think of him right away. Like, oh, if the bugs are eating it, it's not healthy. It's like, or it's really healthy and the bugs are loving it.
Right. And like again, like sugarcane. I love sugarcane. I think I might have told the Chinese sugarcane story last time, and so I won't get into it. But long story short, I love it. I lived in China for 2 years, and you could get off the street for like 5 kwai, which is
Yeah,
like
it's
50
nothing.
cents, and that was great. And it was a little bit of a show too when they chop it up for you. But like sugarcane didn't look like that. Apples didn't look like that. Pineapples didn't look like that. Wheat and corn used to be this big, and so the plants, they have this immune system for what works for them. But then when we domesticated them and we grew them up like 1,000 times the size, and then you're like, well, why doesn't the immune system work the same? Oh, your plants must be unhealthy. No, it's a very fundamentally different context. And I just think that that's like a very weak argument. And
Well,
I
it
think
started with Jorge when he came in. He said, because they think more is better. And what you're
right.
saying, what we've done to all food is the same fucking mentality. Well, we just got to get more. I mean, we got to get more from this rice, and these apples got to produce more, and these bananas need to be bigger, and the watermelons. We just can't help ourselves.
Well, and when people were starving to death, and there was only like, a few million human beings around, or maybe more, I don't know what it was in the Neolithic, but yeah, like I mean, that mattered a whole lot. And various cultures lived and died on what they were able to either produce themselves or acquire in whatever other way they did. But now at this point, it's like, like humans who did this, like it's not their fault. They didn't know, but now we know. Like powdery mildew, like one of my favorite facts about powdery mildew. I kept bringing up barley because most research is on barley and wheat. Because what do we grow forever? Some of us more than others, right? But the thing is that we made wheat powdery mildew, man. Marcus, we made wheat powdery mildew. It's not natural. But when grasses, when we interbred barley with other grasses and we made domesticated barley, those powdery mildews of other grasses hybridized. And because we created this Galapagos Island type situation with a bunch of wheat growing in one place, being cared for, and unlike other barley that would die over the season when it dried out, these ones would continue to be irrigated, things like that. That causes all kinds of selection pressures, and the powdery mildews that survived and thrived in those conditions are the same powdery mildews we're dealing with 10,000 years later, and there's genomic research to support this. And so it's like, what are you trying to like? I just think it's really unfair to say that growers are absentmindedly not worried about health, or that they're somehow growing insufficiently healthful plants. I just think that it reminds me of like when priests would go into towns and they'd be like, look at all these people, thinking dirty thoughts, thinking incorrect thoughts, very sinful. And then people are like, oh shit, he's right. I was just thinking about that. How do you know? But it's like a psychological trick. You're trying to bias people. You're trying to poison the well, and I don't think that's very nice. Even if you're like a supporter of ostensibly like really good growing for the environment and that kind of thing, I think if you're selling a product, then I guess there is an incentive to make certain claims, right? But I want people to make those claims with measurement and ask people why. And I think that would make everybody a lot better as a grower.
I mean, a lot better is everything. If you could just
It's
get
true.
to the bread of it, to just the truth of things, and not complete, because there's always agendas that lean and drive information in particular directions, which are almost always, economic.
Yeah, I mean, that's also a real thing. Like, I don't want to make it all about money, but if the farmer's crop dies, they lose everything a lot of times if they're not subsidized by the government. So it's real people's livelihoods, and I take that really seriously. And so that's why I get so passionate about it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a saying we always said, there's no songs about farming, only laments. Right?
Wow, that goes along with how do you make a small fortune in agriculture? You start with a big fortune. Like
yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Indeed, Leo.
Yeah, so.
But we all need food.
But we all need food, right?
The world needs it. And it is a war on well, I guess it's just a matter of making sure I feel like the more of the unperceivable that you can perceive, the more you'll understand what needs to be done.
I like that, Marcus. I like that. I like exactly how you put that. Put it on a t-shirt.
Let's do it. Let's get it on there. What are you thinking, Stefan? You've been quiet.
Yeah, I was thinking about the Matt used also that quote in the article from Sun Tzu, Art of War, no? That victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. And it reminds me also, in this case, of the grower, no, the typical secret sauce. Let's spray something, no, and it then creates a chain reaction. You don't know what you're doing when maybe with something as elegant as we were saying before, turn off the light, turn on the light, play around with the bug in a much more intelligent way, because you are informed, because you know what you're doing, and. Yeah, but that requires, you have to study it, you have to be calm, and you have to go to war to win it, because you know what you're doing. Ironically, and I don't want to open any political thing, but while we were revising the article for High Times, the entire news story here in the war was starting, and I kept on seeing parallels between, not being informed and the bugs, and I woke up in the morning and like, do I need to go and start fighting something because I'm a pacifist, so not my case, but there is a lot of this strategic thinking, and ultimately we are trying to survive on this planet, and we are trying to eat the food ourselves, not the bugs. So
Yep.
I actually think pacifism is really important, and I think a lot when it comes to even like in a military context, like whatever my opinion matters on the topic. I think that like it's probably not the acme of strategic excellence to fire all their knowledge people who know about the thing you're about to get into, maybe. Or
Does seem to happen a lot though, and not just in politics. Like I've seen it with companies. Like companies are like,
Yes.
let's invest $1 billion into cannabis in Canada. All right, we're going to be hiring people. Who do you think we should hire? I'm thinking people from alcohol, people from like any industry really that isn't cannabis. I think those are the people we're going to hire. And not really even the best version of those people. We might go for the mediocre or even below mediocre threshold to absolutely useless and as tits on a bowl. And so I saw that in Canada. I don't know. I just think that we're very easily led human beings, if that's not necessarily when we sit face to face and converse, because those are the most important conversations where you can really sway someone. But like online with words, there's no swaying or educating people. There's just like, they're like trying to get this dopamine hit. Like, I'm going to get you into the corner. I'm right and you're wrong. And it's just like, oh my God, this is like some addiction of like madness.
Well, let me tell
Dopamine
you
addiction sucks.
I want to say this about that point, which is like some people have described me as a logical person or as a very, like prosaic person in that way sometimes. But here's the thing I think about people and I used to think this way about myself until I actually like read some philosophy on the subject of like a theory of mind and that kind of stuff. And ultimately, I feel like uh, logic is also a human construct. It is not natural law. We are not born with logic. We ourselves, from illogic, create logic, and then that logic happens to be useful. Like again, not all models are wrong. Some models are useful. And so it's often the case, but you can get exceptions and counterfactuals and things that are counter what you would expect. So logic even itself is emotion, and all the stuff below that is still fundamental for humans, and that's why that happens, I think. And and people who are like, I'm logical, I am immune to this, is just they don't understand their own mind in that case, I think, and that's way more immature, I think, than someone who maybe doesn't have that viewpoint. So.
Well, like we started the show off with Jorge's truthful words of like, let's cut through the bullshit. Let's get to the truth. Like, let's just get to the truth. And that is the thing that, to me, the truth is either awareness, and awareness comes from focus. And it's both awareness and a focus that are at war, that are being like attacked right now. Like people's attention and their focus are being attacked on a level that maybe we've never seen in the history of mankind, simultaneously, right through social media and different, screen things. And it's quite something. I see it as like a real mental health.
Well, here
issue.
talking science, and science is being dispelled, right? And being, treated like it's some sort of after effect. And that's one of the things that we have learned in all access of working with cannabis is how truly science is involved. And what Stefan, Jorge, and Matt have brought to us today shows an even a deeper misunderstanding by we cannabis people as a whole, that we have to unlearn some of the bad habits that we've had, but also start to listen to these these new pathways that you're showing us. You're literally showing us new roads to go down that people can literally take, and it's their choice to make. And the problem is we have a lot of willful ignorance. And as you know, Jorge, from decades of writing in cannabis, every grower is different, and every grower is an egotistical child who's never really been challenged. They're literally, so used to being their ass kissed so much by, people who they supply cannabis to, that their egos get so big, you wonder how you can even fit in their grow room with them sometimes, right?
Yeah, actually, some of them told me that. It's like, you're lucky to be here. And I go, okay, thank you.
Thank
I'm
you for
just
that.
happy to be there, And well, anyway, but that's true. They are not challenged, and what they say is law. And also the way things grew up, it's like nobody could talk to each other, because the prohibition.
That's a great
And
point.
so there was a lot of people like Matt didn't exist because they were afraid to. I mean, it's career
Well,
suicide
they
to
would be
talk
attacked.
about cannabis,
I know
The-
people right now who are punished for it in academia because they did some work in cannabis.
Yeah.
And then their other peers, maybe it's really hostile, like, oh, cannabis, really? I think that's morally wrong. But actually, a lot of times it's a lot softer and more insidious. It's like,
Mhm. Yep.
well, you decided to work on this and not like something maybe more, outstanding. And that's more of a academia problem in general, whether it's cannabis or something else.
You
But
bring up
yes, I
something,
completely agree.
but
You
Matt,
you 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 get cut off so many ways. So, and it's so subtle too. It's not. And it could be a rumor that people hear about you. I remember when we lived in the United States. We bought a house there we were there for a few years, and everybody seemed to know what I did, and they said, "Don't knock, whatever you do, don't knock on his door until afternoon, because he's a stoner and he always goes to, and he doesn't wake up until noon." And there's this rumor that goes around the neighborhood, right? And it just runs really fast, and everybody, ha. But damn it, that was against me, and it happens over and over, and we see it nonstop.
well,
And
we
we're
also see it in academia. I mean, as you talked earlier, Matt, about your work with Cornell, right? Well, I know
Yeah.
people who introduced that idea to Cornell and had to literally drag them kicking and screaming into the future. And his career was sabotaged pretty early on, and
Yep.
now he's accepted as, a pioneer. But I mean, and
Yes.
you're talking a prestigious university like Cornell. So just imagine some of the other, hostility that academics are still dealing with. I know a researcher over in Hawaii, and she's strictly growing by herself. She has to grow, plant, propagate, do all the research, compile all the numbers, because they won't give her any academia research people to work with her. So she has to deal with it. And she is literally dealing with probably some of the most amazing experimental crops in cannabis, but she's got to do it solo because she can't get the financial support, much less the support of, the academia behind her. And what she's doing is groundbreaking, and it's going to push things forward. And these are people right now doing real things, struggling in real time because of this cock block by academia that for some reason, as you said, Jorge, there's some stigma that is attached that will not detach.
Well, yeah, like, okay, here's another example. And I think about all of these examples, So we've got Matt, he suggested, he said he was really excited about other uses for cannabis, like horse feed, for example, or livestock feed. Okay, for example, one of my friends that lives in Oregon, is a grass grower actually a grass seed grower, and they also grow cannabis. Well, he also has race horses, but and he's noticed since he put his younger horses on cannabis feed, they mix it in with the other feed. Since he's put it on the cannabis feed, the he doesn't have any problems, like physical problems, or because there's a lot of problems with especially race horses because, well, of all the inbreeding and stuff. And then he had fewer physical problems. His coat looked really good, and it was overall stronger and healthier. Well, as soon as they found out, but they test him because he's a racehorse, they catch the pee and test the pee. And they wouldn't let him do it, and it's the
Oh, no.
Oregon Racing Association, and which is under the national one and everything. So they would all have to change, and all of those guys, bunch of farmers, bunch of ranchers, they will have to change their mind and change what they were drilled into their minds since they were little bitty kids all their whole life. They have to go against their current values and everything that they believed all their life, just so he can feed his horse the cannabis. It's
Ridiculous.
everywhere. It's really deep within the society.
Yeah, but
It's
there's a
not.
reason for it. It's not an accident. It's always been an
No,
agenda.
it's not.
Oh
It's
yeah,
not
for
an
sure.
accident.
Absolutely.
I mean, think of how
Absolutely.
easy it would be for someone who's raising cattle or horse or whatever, even back in the day, just their own few animals to just be like, oh yeah, I just plant, I plant my own herb, but then I plant a bunch for my animals. And then I just feed them these like essential amino acid rich seeds with cannabinoid laced flour. And that's just what they're eating. That is literally
Yeah.
like the makeup of breast milk.
Well, on top of that, what's fascinating, George, all right, so I have a book here from the actual cavalry of the United States military from 1900, and it actually talks about cannabis medicines
Wow.
and cannabis medicines for horses actually in the book itself, okay?
What? That's cool.
Crazy.
Yeah. One of our
Whoa.
guys, I'm in a Veterans
All
Action
right.
Council. One of our veterans is a cavalry guy, and so he did research and found. I have to pull that actual book out. It's on my shelf over here. But yeah, it's an old cavalry book on how to tend and deal with horses. And when it came to certain sicknesses, they needed cannabis pulpices to actually help and clear the digestive tract of the horses. And it was actually part of the medicine. So to
Yeah.
hear that and to know that that historical, reality exists is a kind of like, what the fuck's going on here, ladies and gentlemen?
Yeah. No, it's all prejudice and misinformation. Lots of it.
I also want to say that on this topic, like, like, not that I think anyone here is painting academia with too broad a brush or being, improper or anything like that. But I do want to say that, like, I've met I guess it just makes it more tragic. This point I'm going to make that I've met so many people across the US and other countries too, for that matter, where like the low and mid and even some of the higher level academics who are either what are called agricultural extension agents, who, like I said earlier, their literal job is to, like, you have a problem, well, let's tackle it with the funding from the government so that it doesn't kill all the plants and we go starve, right? Like, we figured that this would be it's a good idea in most cases. And there's tons of people I know in these and similar cases where or leadership positions where they would love to do more work, and they might even help people out because they don't care, they're not biased, they're fine with it. But then the people above them do not like this. And so that causes this chilling effect. So I would want, because sometimes I've mentioned it to people, like, I don't know how comfortable you're with it, but like, hey man, like, you might find an extension agency that might be able to help you. Don't tell them it's on cannabis if you're afraid, but like, bring it to them so they can ID it if I can't ID it, or you don't have a sample on hand or whatever, because these people want to help basically anyone who comes over. And also, I'll make this point in the future, as cannabis gets more accepted, I'm assuming will be the case. it will still have to play nicely with all the other crops we depend on, food crops. And there's pests that many pests in cannabis are not specialists of cannabis; they're on from other crops. And so, there's like hop powdery mildew that colonizes cannabis and hop. Like, what would people do about that? People are gonna get upset about that potentially. What if there's a quarantine pest? You know, at least from a commercial perspective, at least, I think that there's a bunch of other factors that we all have to play nicely with, and that those people will have to play nicely with, hopefully. And there's a lot of people excited for it, but then yeah, there's people who are just putting up barriers. But the sooner we can break those barriers down, like for example, I could have like spent a bunch of time, effort, made one of these like chemicals we were talking about earlier that like repels budworms, let's say, did a bunch of tests, found that it worked out, whatever, independently wealthy, let's say, find that out. But it won't matter because the government won't let people use it. Or like it takes 10 years to produce. Or like what we often joked about in California is that every pesticide company, even if it's a biological or botanical, they have entire wings devoted to California because it's so arduous to go through that process. So part of it is that I want it to be strict. I don't want I don't want the standards to go too low, but I also think that maybe the legislative part or like the 5-year process could be shrunken down so that people aren't feeling forced. Not that I'm saying this is at all justification, but people will go out and they'll use things they shouldn't use. Part of that's education, part of that is ambivalence, which is not ethical, and then a part of it is that they legitimately don't know what they can or can't use, or they don't have good options. And that's not just in the US, that's in other places where these factors might be way more, convoluted, what you can and can't do. I worked with somebody in Maryland where they weren't allowed to change their SOP at all. They had to submit what their SOP was, and then if they wanted to change anything at all about what's allowed, based on what the government says, they have to actually go to them and say, "Here's our new proposal," and then without any evidence or any explanation, they can say nope, or they can say yep. And I think that's not a good precedent, right? That causes problems. And then
It
also
would
I
make
worked
me want to get my SOPs correct the first time.
the first time,
Right.
right? It'd be comprehensive, and also the list was really restrictive anyways. So I'm not even sure that would have mattered much in this particular context. But you're right. I mean, that's another separate issue. And then all the other people are trying to make things work in countries where they said, okay, you're allowed to do this as a business, but um, we don't really have laws or regulations yet. So we can come down at any point and just be like, you're wrong, give us lots of money, so it's unfortunate on both ends.
All right, I got the book. All right, it's called Horses, Saddles, and Bridles by General W.H. Carter from 1906. Okay. And so on page 290, it says cannabis indica, an antispasmodic and anodyne, is recommended in colics, acute indigestion, impaction, and constipation instead of preparations of opium. Good also in tetanus and other painful condition. It relieves pain and irritability without interfering with the secretions of the stomach and intestines. Dose 1/2 of 1 dram. And then it goes on to give on page 305 a spasmodic colic mixture and a flatulent colic mixture, both involving cannabis indica and how to actually mix and make the preparations for your horse. So there you go, Jorge. You can tell your friend in Oregon that it already pre-exists and it was already approved by the United States Army. And in fact, it's signed, I have here by an Alexander Wheeler from 1917, from when he actually went through the West Point and actually used this book as a reference.
Damn, that's going back right there. My kid a couple months ago said to me, "Dad, you're old. You were born in the 1900s." And when he
I don't want to
said
hear
that
that.
shit, I was like, "What
No,
the
19th
fuck?"
century. Yeah, yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like, "What the fuck? I was born in the 1900s." Crazy. All right then. Guess I'm old.
But that's why you're wise.
Yes, wise.
Yes, that's right.
Is that what they say? Is that what they say? Oh my God. Okay. Seriously, we had the most insane lightning storm here last night. It was insane for 2 hours. Like so much rain, so much lightning. If you go look at a weather like Doppler of the storm last night, there were literally like hundreds, if not, thousands of like lightning cloud to surface strikes while torrentially downpouring. It was quite something. The weather
Fun
is tricky.
times.
That sounds fun.
I'll tell you,
Yeah,
it sounds
from a
fun
San
when
Diego
you're in your
perspective.
house, but like when you're in like just like out in nature, like stuck on the mountain for the night, if that happened to be the night, you'd be kind of like, oh.
Oh yeah. Embrace the suck.
Yeah, exactly. You're not wrong, dude. You got to
Yeah,
embrace
you
the
gotta
sun.
just climb a tree.
Yeah, that's
Or something.
sometimes real survival instinct.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. We're in a real natureville here. Bears in the backyard, whales in the front yard, everything in between.
Amazing.
Yeah, had some humpback whales feeding the other day, just lunging out of the water while we were just sitting and smoking a joint on this tiny little kind of dog beach in my village here. That it's the one place the dog owners can take their dog and let him kind of run around, because we have another private, well, not private, public beach now, but not open to dogs. So then you got to like lie and say your dog's what do you call it? One of those.
Service.
Oh, like a work
Service-
dog. Yeah, service dog. Very
yeah.
good.
So then you
Service
get
dog.
this- then you
Animal.
get these
Yeah.
little dogs that are supposed to be service dogs, but then they're attacking like young kids, and you're like,
Yeah.
I don't think that's a service dog. Like,
Yeah.
it seems highly.
Maybe it's
strung
a
to me.
service I ordered.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe it's a different kind of service.
Yeah.
Attack dog is a service. I think the police use it a lot.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. You got to check the box carefully when you're
Yeah,
looking for
yeah.
the service that you're about to get. But yeah, well, that was really awesome conversation, guys. I quite loved it. There's an endless rabbit hole that goes into. I was always amazed when the cannabis companies came to Canada and everyone invested all this money, and I just saw like so many decks, and not a single deck had even a single page or paragraph on crop loss. They were all just like 100% like, we're good, we're gonna crush it, these are the numbers, we got this many lights going in, this is how many pounds we're gonna get, we're gonna spend it on this, we're gonna sell it for that, we're gonna. And I was just always like, oh, like,
Right.
this is farming, like this is agriculture that we're
Yeah.
looking at here. Like, you really have to consider, like, you got to put crop loss in your investor deck. Like, holy shit, how do you not get
What's your-
sued into oblivion by just like, this is farming, by the way, crop loss
No,
can
I'm a
happen, let's
perfect grower. I'm never gonna have problems. I never had a
Yes,
problem in my
exactly.
closet.
Every
you know.
single one of them had problems. Like, there wasn't
Yeah.
one that didn't have problems. Like, it was insane. They were like, what's the worst that could happen if we bought a greenhouse facility that was built for peppers and hothouse tomatoes and just grew cannabis in it? Like, how could we have any problems? Like, that's probably, we're good to go. In fact,
Th-
they
this
were
is gonna
not good to
sound-
go.
This is gonna sound weird, but so people might be wondering, why is this guy? What's this thing with the military, Matt? Like, were you in the military? No, I'm big stolen valor. My family was from a military family, and I wanted to join. I wanted to commission to the army. I ended up not doing that, but because of all that exposure and like strategy, whether it's military or otherwise, I think that's really cool and interesting, and I like to look into that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of really just the physics of like decision making and strategy is just, for so many things, like you said, it's just important. But when I was in ROTC, I thought it was really interesting when we were being trained with squad tactic exercises to do little things like this. A thing that I thought was very puzzling was that we were never really taught, and maybe they got into that later on. Some people I knew went to Ranger School, all that stuff, which is great for them. But they never really talked about what happens when things go wrong. Not a lot of what happens if you get ambushed and how do you do a correct tactical retreat or everything. It was always like,
That's advanced
No.
training. That's
that's
AI
advanced training, absolutely.
Yeah, that's AIT and stuff like that. But you are
That's
taught
true.
that But at the
That's
same
true.
time, I will clarify, as somebody who's been in
Well,
combat, you make up a lot of shit as you go along, and
that's
you're
true.
also fuck shit up, and you get a lot of, we're not going to talk about that when we get home, now are we? Conversations that happen along the way too. So it looks a lot better on the outside, but there's a lot of stuff on the inside that you just, yeah, it just go par for the course. But
On a
yeah.
similar note for to that though, like with especially with regards to training, you know, like unlike some other people, other training that is very scripted and very like we do it in the best environment possible. We want to like good to the leaders, you know, like the PRC, PLA, that kind of stuff. We don't train that way. We train in the suck. We train with raining. We train all that kinds of because that stuff is going to happen. And there's a big difference. And I think it's very relevant to what Marcus has brought up here, where it's like, you know, we want to put our best foot forward, absolutely. But if you're trying to come over here and say that, you know, nothing bad will ever happen, don't worry about it, of course, that's just not going to be what happens in the field. And you're going to be woefully unprepared. You'll have no exposure to it. And frankly, if all of your people are basically 2-year conscripts or whatever, they're gonna have a problem. But anyways, that was my little armchair general speech. People, I will see the conversation of people much more experienced and knowledgeable in that case. I have great respect for people who went in, especially knowing many people in my family and otherwise who got into it. So that was a really cool book too.
The Art of War by Sun Tzu, as Stefan said earlier, a very referenceable book in the art of life as well as the art of war and the art of business, really. I mean, you have to know your enemy. And what you have taught us today is know your enemy better than you know your friends, right? And the enemy here is your pests and diseases. And what we have been doing is assaulting them wrong. We're not understanding the ever swarm reality and have just thought exactly as you said earlier. We're just doing the Bruce Lee versus Chuck Norris situation and
Yeah,
expecting that, oh, it's done, it's over, it's settled in one bout, because that's what we've been taught, and not understanding the layers of attack, right, that are happening and helping you arrive here, because it's layers of ever swarms. It's not just one. It's from your helping us understand, it seems to be layers of swarms. So it's literally starting with the first swarm and working your way backwards. So that's a way of knowing your enemy. And as you taught us or told us of these biological triggers that these bugs have, and then using nature against them, is something we really never thought about. We only thought, I mean, when I worked for, I was Ed Rosenthal's general manager. And so Ed's got all kind of fucked up ideas. And one of those ideas was, we just kill it with pesticides, and then, we're going to be, then we scrub it with, O2, and, everything's fine. And we start all over again, and not understanding that, oh, you have to look at your intake and where your intake air is coming from, and learn things like, planting peppermints and mint so you don't get the white powdery mildew from your roses coming into your intake area, right? So it's figuring out and knowing. And the problem is most people just grow. They don't think about the pests and then the grow. They just do the grow, and then, oh shit, I've got pests, now I have to deal with pests, so I'm just going to do like a roach, spray something on it, it's going to go away. And I think y'all have done a great job of helping people understand that that type of mentality belongs in the 19th century. It does not belong in today's agricultural growing science.
well, I definitely appreciate that compliment, and I think that point has been made not only in this article that we all worked on, but also like in general. I think it's a pretty agreeable idea that at the very least nobody knows everything. We need to know more, and there's a bunch of stuff we already know that can be applied now. It's only a point of if you don't understand some of that stuff, some of those details, like seek people who do, find that information out. I've been super impressed with the scholarship of so many people who are into this kind of stuff. And I will say, I do encounter a lot more people in the living soil regenerative space. Maybe if there's a problem there, sometimes it might be that there's maybe too much of a, maybe like a sort of maybe magical idea of like the nature and all the way it interacts. That's maybe not as representative based on some of the ecological research and things we might know. But on the other hand, they do tend to be really more interested in details. They tend to have to matter more to their grow process, and within and under that fertile bed of curiosity and interest, I think you have a much better chance of like appreciating those factors, learning more, researching more. And so, but no matter how you're growing, I think that's really key. And some
Understanding.
information doesn't matter too. So you have to find that as well.
Yeah, Matt, do you mind actually on that same note of more info, but can you explain what it is that the silicon has as far as a response, a pathogen as a response or suppression from it? What is doing that?
So I remember I mean, all different plants are going to be different here, but I think there's a very general response that's conserved across various species. I know that there's like immunomodulatory effects. So essentially the silicon, like detection of the silicon, uptake of the silicon itself changes effects. I think salicylic acid pathway interactions occur. It's probably very complicated across different species. And I don't remember exactly the dynamic, but I know there is this function. And then there is a much more just physical, mechanical effect, which is what a lot of people have heard, which is that, like in the example before, the silicon level in the tissues actually increases. Not by a lot, not like by 30%, but like by a little bit over 1%, almost 2% maybe. And that physical rigidity, and there's also like metals and other things
Yes.
that plants will take into themselves, and they will put into that papilla I talked about, like for powdery
Yes.
mildews. And also like there's rice varieties from Africa that I've seen bred that they have little spikelets made of silicon, and when the caterpillars come to chomp on them, yes, they will get some damage. And if people are interested, I could send the pictures. They're in my budworm video, so for people who are interested in that.
Microspikes.
But they literally will wear down their mandibles, and you can see all the dentications, and like the sickle-like shape has been just reduced
Wow.
to like nubs.
Okay.
And they don't feed very well. And so like that's like a really cool
Sure.
thing. It's non-chemical in a way.
Yeah.
And it also improves other aspects like probably physical rigidity of the
Yeah.
grain and other sorts of things. So I'm excited for this. I don't think it will cause problems when people smoke because it's a change of maybe less than 1%, in the
Okay.
examples that I brought up. So I really don't think that it would be like toxic or problematic in this way.
Huh, that's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love people to like look into the immune factor because I can't represent it very well, but that's
Yeah,
more
maybe
fascinating to me because it's just silica, and
right.
also bounded with another product. And I don't remember the source, which you asked before, but yeah, that's also usually important too. I think it was a very common. I think it might have been just. I don't even remember. I don't want to say, but yeah, people can check out the video, the
Oh,
reference on the slide earlier in the presentation.
will do.
Hell yeah. Really sweet. Really sweet. Well, we've got 15 more minutes left. If anyone has any last little things they want to say, we've got another, quarter hour. So it'll go quick. Maybe a dab in that time.
I'll say three more slides. We talked about information. I want to leave people with some really good info from my powdery mildew deep dive video about the most important powdery mildews for us in cannabis. So here we go. And I will be pretty quick here. Save the best for the last. So this is from a paper that was looking from a really amazing powdery mildew researcher who I really respect. And he and a team of other people did other research like this one here, which we'll get into. But he looked at different powdery mildews. He looked at the research data we have on powdery mildews in different plants. So what they found was that in this U.S. National Fungus Collections Fungus Host data set, which is a mouthful, They across 10,000 plus hosts, excuse me, they found 10,125 different hosts in this data of plants that had powdery mildew. That's about almost 3% of all flowering plant species. That's a ton. That's really impressive for any pathogen. They found about over 1,900, almost 2,000 different species groups or genera. And then in those, across 205 plant families, 200 is almost, the vast majority of plant families. So it means that a diverse amount of plants get powdery mildew. They looked across 200 countries and in 6 continents. And in total, there were about 72,000 reports of powdery mildews, which was almost 10% of all of the fungus plant data that they had in general. And the 5 most reported powdery mildew host species of plants were cucumber, melon, squash, tomato, and papaya. The top 5 host genera they found were Quercus, which are oaks, Prunus, which are like stone fruit, Euphorbia, which are called spurges, Rosa or roses, and Salix, which are the willow species. So these plants in cannabis, it's unclear all of the different powdery mildews that might colonize cannabis. Some of these might be hosts to the most common powdery mildew species, which are the lettuce powdery mildew, Golovinomyces boyai, which was recently switched from a different species name, which I won't get into, and also a different one, Golovinomyces ambrosiae. Now, these are both very hybrid-prone species. These are both species with a ton of different hosts known for this group of powdery mildews, which doesn't bode well for the idea that they would be too specialized to be on other plants. The top 5 plant families that get powdery mildew were the Asteraceae, which are like daisies and sunflowers and those kinds of plants. The Fabaceae, which are like beans and legumes. The Rosaceae, which are roses and their kin. Poaceae, which are grasses. And the Lamiaceae, which are mints. So these are the top 5 plant families that powdery mildews were found on. So you might consider these plants on your property, in your area. Maybe you don't want those plants on your property potentially. And most of these were reported in the USA. Specifically, this research mostly comes from California, Washington, and then less so Iowa, Florida, Wisconsin, Russia and its nearby regions, China, Switzerland, and Poland. This was the Golovinomyces I mentioned earlier. On the left is the sort of total representation of powdery mildew affected plant families with the colors on the right of that left pie chart. And on the right, we have Golovinomyces and its tendencies. And you'll see that more than half are on this brown color, which are the asters. So daisies and sunflowers and those plants are a major host for the powdery mildew group that colonizes cannabis, or at least those 2 species. Another big one are the Solanaceae, which are like peppers and tomatoes and things like that. And so I just wanted to make that point. And then in a 2022 research report, the earlier one that I just mentioned was 2024, so only 2 years ago. And this one was a 6-year garden survey. To Marcus's point and several other people's points, basically, we don't even know what we're dealing with a lot of times. This looked at places in North America. They're represented even in Mexico. They found across 12 North American botanical gardens, they looked at 219 host plants, 300 powdery mildew species, 130 powdery mildew species were documented, but 30 of those were undescribed, and 45 of those were actually new host powdery mildew records. And they also considered North America powdery mildew to be quite understudied, which means that we should seek out and investigate more information. It means that even our most common, most accurate, most up-to-date records are kind of insufficient. And so we don't know a whole lot about this in North America and across cannabis community in general. But this is some of the information we might use to inform our decisions. Maybe not have some of these plants around, maybe consider that we know less than we do know. and look out for some of that research to come in the future. And that's all I have on that.
That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. That was great, dude.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
all of that. That was wonderful.
Standing ovation. Yes.
Sitting ovation.
Encore. I
Sitting
feel
ovation,
dumb.
I like that. You guys too, for that matter.
Do a slow clap.
Yippoo.
Oh my goodness, that was fun. Hash Church, I'm so glad I didn't have to race at 7 a.m. for an hour to my lab, which I've had to do the last 2 Sundays, which has been fun and wonderful. And I like going back and looking at the videos and seeing how nice and clean the lab looks. But my goodness, it's also nice to have a day off with the family.
Wow.
Absolutely.
You don't get many of those, do you, Marcus?
Well, this is my day off. I just started it with a 4-hour podcast.
Wow.
Are you
Hey,
going to look at the nice?
man.
Are you going to look at the nice trees in your backyard?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I still have imprinted in my memory the look across the way, and how it just looks so beautiful with all those pine trees, right? Weren't they?
Yeah, we've got cedars and we've got hemlocks and we've got oaks, and there's a whole variety here in the Pacific Northwest, particularly in my little village here. We've got other like randos like the monkey tree and the arbutus tree.
Oh yeah.
But mostly it's a lot of cedar and kind of hemlock mixed in. Hemlock's the sketchy one because they break. They got a really good root system, but over time they tend to break about halfway or 2/3 of the way up.
Ooh.
And so they're considered kind of a dangerous tree in our village. Anyone that has had a tree fall through their house in my village exclusively will tell you, yeah, it was a hemlock, which is funny because the tree guys, when they, you don't know what your trees are, you call the tree guy, hey, I want to clear these branches, and he's like, yeah, okay, but like that one's got to go, like it's right next to your house. Like, do you know what kind of tree that is? Like that's fucking. And then they're just like, well, how much is that going to be? It's like, well, it's $5,000 or $10,000, whatever it is, to cut a 200-foot tree down and fucking get rid of the whole thing. It's a lot of work and labor. And then people are like, well, I'm not doing that. It's like, all right, well, like, here's the thing. Like, when you go to claim your insurance, they're going to ask you, did an arborist suggest that you cut that tree down? And if you say no, so yeah, it's a tricky thing. They're beautiful trees. I have one growing in front of my house. It's like 20 feet from my neighbor's house. And I've mentioned it to him. I'm like, dude, that's like a hemlock. You can kind of tell too, when you look, cedars, mostly the top of the cedar, it might lean a little bit, but it'll have like these kind of like a little one and then a double one, but it'll be pretty much straight. The hemlocks are like this. They're like letting you know they've got a weakness systemically.
I'm gonna go this way.
Yeah, just like the whole top is bent right over. It's like, yeah, that doesn't look good. So luckily it's far enough away that if it does fall, it can't hit my house. But it can hit.
I remember you saying that was a big political thing, sort of like people like want to get rid of some trees, but it causes the view to change, and then people hate that and they get upset.
100%. People are people first of all are very entitled, and then with that false entitlement, you can really fuel a lot of bad shit with that. So yes, people are they're very tricky with trees. I lived here for 17 years. Well, I lived here actually for 29 years, but I lived in this house on this property for the last 17 years and never cut a tree. And I only really just started cutting trees. I didn't realize in 17 years that my ocean view, which was fully an ocean view, like 180 degrees, was just all trees. And so now I've begun to like capture back some of my ocean view, and but I'm just doing the trees on my property. I'm not like looking to talk to other people on, hey, would you mind like cutting your trees down so I can see better? That does seem like pretty wildly insane. And I don't think I'll be doing that anytime soon. But I do want to thank Puffco for fucking sponsoring the show and being awesome folks. I want to thank the Press Club for also being a sponsor of Hash Church. Really wonderful companies that you can support by going and hitting the links that Bingo is almost inevitably posting in the chat here now. This is interesting. I wonder why it says we have 4 minutes remaining. I've never seen the timer on Zoom before, probably because I chose 4 hours. But I wonder if at the end of that, it just cuts the stream. It's like a little time glass with 3 minutes and 43 seconds next to it. I've
boy.
never seen that in 12 years of streaming. Thank you, Jorge and Stefan and Matthew for coming on and sharing all the IPM goodness, and appreciate you guys being here. And thank you, Brian from Best Friend Farms. It's been so long since you came on, dude. You were the
Thank
perfect
you.
person to have
Yes.
perfect questions for Matthew. It's really good to see you, dude.
Thanks for
I
having me.
hope
Thank
to
you,
be
guys.
enjoying your flavors here sooner than later.
I can't wait to hear from you on it.
And of course, Etienne and Colin, as always, thank you guys. You guys are the OGs, always here, always representing, and always making us look good over here on Hash Church. And of course, the people watching, you know, I think we had around 300 people watching at a time here. We probably already had a couple thousand views over the whole course of the show. So thank you all out there, Bingo, for holding it down, and Robert Carroll for just being fucking awesome in Spain right now, putting his cows inside so we can get ready for a nice evening. We will see you sooner than later. May the full melt bless your bowl sooner than later. And that's all I have. Peace out.
Hallelujah.
Everybody. Hallelujah.
Thank
Peace
you.
out.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mark.